This is your news bulletin from Power 102 Digital.
It is Tuesday, the 20th of August, 2024. Good morning, Trinidad and Tobago. This is News to 6 a.m. on News Power Digital and METV. Opposition leader Kamala Prasad-Bissessar believes while some of the history behind Christopher Columbus has to be revisited, Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley's promise to remove his ships from the country's coat of arms needs to be carefully thought out. This is because she believes, if not handled properly, it can ignite racial tensions in Trinidad and Tobago. In a statement yesterday addressing the plan to remove the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria from the national emblem and replace them with the steel pan, Prasad-Bissessar acknowledged that Columbus was wrongfully celebrated for some time. She, however, said that she's of the belief that sanitizing history, truth, and free speech in a modern era of wokeness, virtue signaling, and cancel culture will only promote ignorance and foster the repetition of evil acts in the future and can be preventable. She said erasing history by removing symbols will not improve or change citizens' understanding of history, adding, the nation's true history should be taught in our schools, one that provides the good, the bad for all historical figures. She had the truth of our past and present is bitter and harsh and should not be manipulated to serve any singular agenda. Instead, it should be used to enlighten successive generations so they will not repeat the mistakes and misdeeds of the past. Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley announced at the PNM Special Convention on Sunday that the steel pan will soon replace the 3 ships of Columbus on the country's coat of arms. More than $2 billion is needed to address problems at the nation's schools. However, funding is not available at this time to undertake such a move. Education Minister Dr. Nian Gaspidoli indicated repair to schools is done on an ongoing basis. The update given during a news briefing held yesterday afternoon. Minister Gaspidoli admits some issues at schools came up across the country, and at time to time, attention is placed on addressing issues which may arise. It was noted the most important issues are dealt with first by contractors, and the afternoons and weekends are used to carry out remedial work also. Meanwhile, Trinidad and Tobago schools will open doors to 23 Venezuelan children next month. However, hundreds of others will remain locked outside our education system. Of the 23 approved, 4 will be placed at government schools, 18 at the nominational schools, and 1 at the private schools. Education Minister Dr. Nian Gaspidoli listed all the preparations, legal, administrative, and educational, to admit the young migrants, and Minister of National Security Fitzgerald Hines told reporters about 2,000 Venezuelan migrants are now in TNT, including those not registered officially as migrants. Economist Marla Durkaran is of the view that more effort is needed to address massive departure of U.S. currency from Trinidad and Tobago every year. She cautioned this situation can have serious complications. Durkaran describes as unacceptable the $2 billion she described as leaving the nation annually. She's also suggesting all be done to address the situation and call for politicians to do so. National Petroleum Chairman Sahid Hussain says the company is not making money on more than half of its gas stations across the country. He was speaking at a media conference on August 19th at the Marriott Courtyard Hotel in Port of Spain. Hussain said NP service stations network consists of 117 active service stations, of which 65 are profitable for the operator but uneconomical for NP. Hussain says if it were to be looked at from a business standpoint and a private sector business standpoint, most of those stations would not be operating because the volumes they generate are not sufficient to make a return. He added, it also has nothing to do with the size of the catchment area and how many people are purchasing fuel in that catchment area. He explained this is due mostly to the locations of some service stations in far-flung communities including Cedros, Toko, Mayaro, Icacos, and Maruga, and explained these community sites are subsidized by NP. The University of the West Indies St. Augustine campus has noted the declaration by the World Health Organization recently of mpox as a health emergency of international concern. UWI says it's committed to dedicate its research expertise for the public good, working with regional partners to help face this challenge. UE explains it acquired cutting-edge virus sequencing technologies during the COVID-19 pandemic, which can now be redeployed against mpox to provide strong early detection mechanisms. It currently has the capabilities in labs to make rapid and accurate diagnoses of mpox and will work closely with regional ministries of health, the Caribbean Public Health Authority, CARFA, and the Pan American Health Organization to respond to any introduction of the virus in the region. 0.3% is the inflation rate for July 2024. This represents a decrease from 0.7% recorded in the previous period, June 24 to June 2023. The inflation rate for the comparative period was 4.7%. The all items index calculated for the prices collected for the month of July 2024 was 123.9, representing an increase of 0.2 points or 0.2% above all items index for June 2024. The index for food and non-alcoholic beverages increased from 148.6 in June 24 to 149.6 in July 24, reflecting an increase of 0.7%. Contributing to increases was the general upward movement of prices for fresh whole chicken, Irish potatoes, soya bean oil, plantains, frozen whole chickens, table margarine, eggs, okras, carrot, and dasheen. However, the full impact of these price increases were offset by the general decrease in the prices of pumpkin, tomatoes, melon, white flour, celery, grapes, green peppers, melon, mixed seasoning, and garlic. Minister of National Security Fitzgerald Hines says because of the facilitation of corrupt state officials, illegal weapons are making their way into the country through legal ports. Minister Hines was speaking yesterday morning on the Power Breakfast Show. He was asked to comment on the rise in murders being committed in Trinidad and Tobago and the hike in gun violence. He said one of the major issues were illegal guns making their way into the shores with the help of corrupt officials. He said there's been a lot of collaboration with international parties as well as the police service, and much has been done to ensure the situation is being dealt with. Finally, U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris is leading from President Donald Trump as she prepares for the headline moment at the Democratic National Convention. The DNC opinion polls are showing across the country. On the eve of the convention in Chicago, Harris holds the lead of between 3 to 6 percentage points in the race for the White House, two opinion polls showed. Harris is ahead of Trump by 49 to 45% among registered voters and 51 to 45% among likely voters in the two-way race, according to an ABC Washington Post Ipsos poll. And that is news to 6 a.m. right here on News Power Digital. We'll have major news coming your way at 7 a.m. Good morning.
Up to date and credible. Power 102 Digital.
It is the 20th day of August. Thank you so much for joining us on the Power Breakfast Show on Power 102 Digital. Of course, on the show this morning, Dr. Paul Richards. You just heard him with our news brief. Richard Ragoobarsingh, he'll join us. We got Shane and Ruben in the mix. Of course, my name is Steve Khan. 27 degrees on both islands, and the weather for today, pretty much what you got yesterday. And of course, that super moon looked absolutely gorgeous last night. And of course, this morning when I was driving in, absolutely gorgeous. Traffic-wise, got nothing to tell you about, all right? So good morning to you, Pablo. What's shaking?
Good morning, Steve. It already shook.
Oh. Not saying a word. Not saying a word. It shook. Shook you all night long? Should I sing that? Maybe we might get some rain over the
10
reservoir.
minutes after 6 o'clock.
Let's say good morning to a few folks already on Facebook and on YouTube, like Maria Celia, God Celia, Wendy and James, DJ Ray out in Delaware, Beefy Smith out in beautiful Goodwood, Tobago, Marcia Rock in Orlando, Oliver Man Warren, Wayne Bennett in Covington, Georgia, Miss Ingrid in Tucson, Arizona, Gloria Gray, Ray Ray out in West Palm Beach, Florida, Pearl Cordes, good morning, Carol Guevara in Chicagonas, Rena Boudou Jennings, Trinidad Margo, Wayne Ramsey, D. Pierre, Nikisha Pierre, John Cato, Mo Gaines, Biznat Basad, Michael Robinson out in Yokohama, Japan, David Wes, and of course, Mrs. Wes, good morning. Lister Lodge, okay. Ambrose Blah from the U.S. Virgin Islands, okay, Ambrose, and of course, CJ out in New York, Captain Ron out in California, Val, Danraj, David Nelson, good morning. Someone is saying from Toronto, Anthony from Toronto, looking at us on YouTube. Thank you so much. All right. Thank you for sending us hellos. We love when you wake up in the morning and you say, let me message the Power Breakfast crew. Thank you so much. Yeah. All righty. Did you go out and watch that moon last night or this morning?
No. I have to stay in time when it's that full moon. I'll turn into a werewolf or a vampire. So
yeah, you know, as I say that, Ray had sent me a video at 1:40. Well, she didn't send it to me at 1:42. At 1:42, a lady walked into someone's yard and going, hello, hello, anybody there? Hello, help, help, hello, help, help. But the people did not open their door. They did not. Tony noticed the lady walk back out and jump in a car and gone. Unbelievable, huh?
So it could have been a setup.
Yeah. It's who you going to trust these days?
No, that's true. And these criminals are getting very creative, so you have to be so careful.
Yeah. You know? I'm like, wow. You know.
Anyway.
Yu out in Japan. Good morning, Yu. Hope all is well. Yeah, you got to be so careful now. Thanks, Ray, for that video. I was like,
I saw another video also yesterday of one purporting to be a young girl dressed in a towel.
Oh, yeah.
Brandishing a gun.
Two of them.
Loading the gun. Pointing the gun at the camera. Kind of menacing away. Look like a very young girl. So the caption on the video seems to be indicating, I have no way of identifying if it is actually what it said it is. Seemingly, allegedly, the 16-year-old girl who found herself in the car with the 4 men on the wrong end of police weapons recently. Is it in central Trinidad?
Freeport.
Yeah. And if it is indeed confirmed that that caption on the video is true, why the question arises as to why a 16-year-old girl is in a video in a towel with a revolver. Looks like a high-powered revolver also to me. Loading the weapon, dancing to music, and pointing the weapon and cocking the gun. You know, this crack the gun, and pointing it at the camera. And if it is indeed confirmed that that is true, I think her parents have a lot of questions to answer. Because at 16, if that is indeed true, that is her, she's a minor.
Correct.
And if it is indeed so, confirmed to be her, why is anyone surprised when she ends up lifeless in a car with 4 men after allegedly robbing 2 households, not so? And ending up on the wrong end of police weapons. So when I saw social media erupt after the reports came out about 5, including teenage girl, killed after firing at police, and why the police do this, and she was a good girl and she didn't deserve this. Why? And another report, another person was on social media saying, quote unquote, they didn't have to kill them. They could have taken them. And I saw a man saying that you should ask yourself, oh, sorry, Carol says a pistol, not a revolver. Well, I ain't no gun expert, Carol, so I don't know. Why a 15-year-old is in a video with a weapon to be nebulous and not face the chastisement. I don't know what is the difference between a pistol and a revolver. I guess there's a difference. And why she's in a car with 4 grown men. But I think one of the men were 19, so there's an adult male. And why she's in a video holding a gun, brandishing a gun, loading a gun, cracking a gun, menacingly at a camera. And what is your role or not your role in where she ends up in a morgue on a slab with police bullets in her body? Ask yourself that. And the other people in the car too. Okay? So very often I understand, but when we are calling for body cam footage, people sometimes default and think, well, what we want that for? Well, it's to confirm what happened, so people will see. Because if she could be in a video holding a gun, if that is indeed true, it is not so far-fetched to think that she could have a gun in a car. And it is not so far-fetched to think that she could have a gun in a car and fire at police. Okay? I don't know. And
it's at 15, Paul. 15.
I heard 16, but it didn't make much difference.
All right, 15 or 16?
15 and 16 don't make much difference.
Exactly. I'm just going to tell you that. And
one can also assume that if she feels so comfortable, or if she felt so comfortable, first of all, if she had access to a gun, because I believe she had no fuel at 16.
No.
You understand that?
No.
Almost 100% sure ain't no way she have a legal gun at 16. And felt brave enough and bold enough and emboldened enough to be cracking this gun and loading this gun on video, that she more than likely would have been in bad company before that. Because the person in the video I saw was very comfortable in a towel, Rama Jane herself. And the only reason I'm not playing the video is because although she is no longer alive, it's still a minor. Out of a minimum of respect for the family. You understand? So when somebody said yes, and they get to the point where they do anything for social media likes.
Boy.
The parents, Rena said her mother made excuses saying since her father died from COVID, she had episodes and was looking for a father figure. Just now, Steve. Right, so I didn't say what I want to say there. I just had to take a breath, not to say what I really want to say.
Yeah, I know what you're going to say.
So, and you're right, Rena. That's just an excuse from the mother. Okay? That child clearly was on a dangerous trajectory for quite a long time. And I don't think, with the greatest of respect, that a father dying in a home, if a child is being raised properly, is going to have that sort of impact to drive her into the hands of gang members and criminals to be part of that sort of scenario. But let it be a lesson to other parents who are not parenting effectively, or who are letting their teenage children, or sometimes younger, run them, wag the dog, as opposed to the dog wagging the tail. You understand? And yes, Lester, the caption in the video is so bold, and it's like, wow. To the it's just very disturbing. And I always say, show me a good child. A child is doing well, and I'll show you dedicated, focused parents.
Mm-hmm.
And show me a child who has run astray like that, and I will tell you something went wrong along the way. Different families have different dynamics and different circumstances, but at the end of the day, people like to talk about single mothers and single mothers. Single mothers raise wonderful children in this country,
Very much so.
Okay. So that single mother excuse that I like to think, and not all single mother situations are the same. I don't get me wrong, but the single motherhood excuse is not an excuse that flies by me very easily.
Mm-hmm.
You understand? So, she and the other people in the car who allegedly robbed 2 households before police got the information as to where they were, and went behind them, and they ended up all unalived after the encounter with police. The police report is that they opened fire on police, like the 3 before them, the weekend before them. If you think that's the way to go, continue. We'll see how it ends up. But I'll tell you, based on the utterances of the police and the utterances of the Prime Minister and the utterances of the Minister of National Security, police don't seem to be being shot at too lightly.
No.
They're not going to duck and say, oh my God, bullets. Well, guys, let's turn around and go back to the station. They don't seem to be doing that. So if you want to hedge your bets, good for you. And while I say that, I still call for body cam footage.
Yeah.
David West indicated, I asked the minister about it yesterday, about the 84%. David West says in the last couple of years of encounters with police and alleged criminals, have no body cam footage. So I have to question whether or not this policy is actually being applied consistently or not. Well, I'd have to question. The 84% says it's not. Question. Okay? The question is why not? Because the police commissioner present and past have said on numerous occasions that it is standard operating procedure. But I don't know, like the batteries run out quite often. Charging the battery.
And quite quickly.
So, or sometimes, as they say, we just happen not to carry the camera on that occasion. You understand? So, what I go tell you, good morning, Ragoobarsingh. You come in time to end my rant. It's a little slow this morning.
He's a little slow.
No, I wasn't hearing you all at all.
You
So I
hear me
don't know
slow?
what. Yeah, just something just clicked in there. Like the audio was.
Did you turn on the right side of your brain this morning? I know there's 2 batteries here.
So, yeah, so now we're hearing the audio.
Good morning, Mr. Ragoobarsingh.
Good morning, guys. Good morning to our listeners and viewers, wherever you are across the planet.
I was opining about a video I saw over the weekend, purported to be that of the 16-year-old girl who ended up unalived after she and her 4 compatriots, according to police reports, opened fire on police after robbing 2 households. And the fact that she was brandishing a gun and loading the gun in a towel and cracking the gun and pointing at the camera, the normal social media nonsense. Yeah. And how parents need to take responsibility, because we are her parents, and her parents, according to some people in the chat, was interviewed. Her mother was interviewed by Ian Allen, and saying that she went astray when her father died from COVID, and she was looking for a father figure in the wrong areas. Miss me with that nonsense. Excuses. Miss me with that strippers. She ended up holding a gun and brandishing a gun in that emboldened way, in a towel, because she father died from the COVID-19 2 years ago. Miss me with that nonsense, ma'am. The conversation following Dr. Rowley's announcement on Sunday at the PNM Special Convention that the coat of arms will have, and they have a whole other conversation about whether it's actually the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria, and not three other boats. It's Columbus boats. That should suffice. They're replacing Columbus boats, whether it's the Nina, the Santo Domingo, the Esperaldo, they're replacing Columbus boats with the pan. Has taken up quite a bit of the oxygen in the system since Sunday. I see the leader of the opposition is now weighing in, saying that while she agrees that, let me just read it verbatim so I don't get into trouble. The history behind Christopher Columbus has to be revisited. She said that the promise to remove the ships from this country's coat of arms need to be carefully thought out, because if not handled properly, it can ignite racial tensions in Trinidad and Tobago. She said she acknowledged that Columbus has been wrongfully celebrated. However, the belief that sanitizing history, truth, and free speech in the modern era of wokeness, virtue signaling, and cancel culture will only promote ignorance and foster the repetition of evil acts in the future that can be preventable. So she acknowledged that Columbus is a problem. I think we all acknowledge that Columbus and his erroneous history perpetrated on us for centuries needs to be corrected. That the removal of the coat of arms need to be carefully. So I saw people quoting about it will cost so much money, and the money on the emblem and the money need to change. You all realize that we change money regularly in this country, bills, because bills get worn out and we change bills all the time in this country. You all realize that, right? That's an ongoing cost. What are your thoughts on this development, Mr. Ragoobarsingh?
I mean, I looked at all of the arguments for and against. I saw some of the arguments. I shouldn't say I looked for it, because if you don't look for nothing, they just come up on your screen. And about the issue, I mean, I think it should be changed. I just wish it was done. And I don't know. I don't know that I agree that it should be done at a PNM convention. I think because those kinds of symbols are national in quality and should be aired in Parliament, and that's the forum for changing it. But it should be changed. I agree with that. I have no issue with it being changed. The issue about ethnic issues and stuff, I don't know. I know some people were stretching and in some of the
I don't follow the argument.
Yeah, and I wasn't.
I can't follow the argument that removing the three ships can potentially lead to racial tension.
Some of the comments I saw talked about including the TASA, and people were saying,
well, it went there too.
It went there. And they were saying
that TASA is not indigenous to Trinidad.
And some of the arguments were, well, TASA is not indigenous to Trinidad and Tobago. And then some of the arguments were, so what? It should be included nevertheless because it has become an important part of the culture. And I'm like, and this is why when you do it in a political forum, because a PNM convention is a political forum and it's a state symbol, it's not a PNM symbol, it's a state symbol, it becomes the fodder for all sorts of non-sober discussion on the issue. Rather than if you do it in a national arena, then at least it's more sober.
Or I guess that's where the conversation about racial tension come in.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe from some of those comments, but I mean, the people who were asking for that didn't have, to me, much of a ground to stand on, because the steel pan itself has been contributed to by all ethnicities in Trinidad and Tobago.
And it is unarguably an instrument created in Trinidad and Tobago.
Yeah.
Just like doubles.
Just like what?
Doubles.
So to me, it is so much more than an ethnic issue, and like people are trying to make out that, oh, the steel pan is of some sort of ethnic issue. I absolutely don't see that at all. It's come out of us, and us the collective. in terms of the history of the steel ban. So, it's one of those other things that Trinidad and Tobagonians are going to discuss. It's going to be changed anyway. It's a fait accompli.
He didn't say going to be changed, He said that gone.
And that's what I'm saying. It's
He
a
gave you a timeline and how it's going to happen. He
I said
actually referenced the fact that
it's a fait accompli.
that's a fait accompli.
So that, the changes are going to happen when we move on.
And then the people started to argue about the cost of it, and should we be spending this money? Puerile arguments. Puerile.
Yeah.
Puerile arguments. But you're right. If you announce it in Parliament, it takes the politicization out of it.
Yeah.
And the polarization out of it. I heard also being circulated on social media. I do not think social media will destroy the world eventually. It's such a great tool, but it's such a dangerous tool in the wrong hands.
Be very divisive.
Yeah. An audio clip being circulated purporting to be that of some agent of or associate of persons who met the end after encounters with police, suggesting, and I'm not going to play it because I'm not going to propagate that kind of nonsense, that they're planning to attack police and shoot police to stop the police doing their job and etc. It is a very disturbing
Oh, okay. I didn't know.
Audio clip.
Those things don't come up in my stream at all.
Well, if they don't come up in my stream, please send them to me on WhatsApp.
Oh, it's WhatsApp.
Yeah. So, and it's so disturbing that, well, now, in other words, we ain't quote unquote, we ain't taking that from police. You're a criminal though. We expect the state to just sit back and say, okay, well, criminals will purport crime, will engage in crime, and we'll just take it.
Yeah.
And do expect the police to respond, and the fact that the police respond in a particular way now upset you. Okay.
You know what? What was another thing that was a little upsetting to me, Paul? The HTC issue. And you know why it upsets me? That HGC issue of the cancellation of the tenders. I think there was a Santa Rosa development, and there's another development, I think, that a Chinese company had won. I don't know if it's the same thing. To me, it seemed to be two different developments. And they canceled the tenders for both. Let me tell you what annoys me. The issue of housing in Trinidad and Tobago is a sore point that has existed since 1962. And we're about to celebrate independence. Since 1962, we're grappling with this issue of housing, and not only that, housing of a particular standard for citizens across the country. There's some citizens, of course, that still have latrines. There's some citizens that still live in
outside latrine, you're right.
Deplorable conditions. And for a country that has been so wealthy for so long, it aggravates me that people still live in those kinds of conditions after so many different governments have been in charge of us. And I look at it as a failure on the part of all of those governments collectively. And when you think, and when HDC now has, which of course is the primary vehicle for getting a lot of that state housing, and I do not believe, I know some people believe, give people the land and let them deal with their housing, or I believe that the state has to be in charge of getting as much housing onto the market of a particular standard for people to lift that part of the community that is in substandard housing immediately and as quickly as possible, or who even don't have access and are struggling. And when you have these developments that are supposed to be done in terms of building housing, one, you're late because it should be building housing all the time as much as you can. That's my philosophy, and that's the way I think the country needs to go, at least with regard to housing. And then to have these two things cancelled because of because apparently there are now challenges because of the Procurement Act. It annoyed me. And I'll tell you why it annoyed me. if you are confident in your transparency of the process under the new procurement legislation, it gives people the right in a 10-day period after they are notified that, let me explain it to people because you may not understand the Procurement Act. You do the tender, you open up the tender, there's an evaluation of the tenders to build the HDC housing, whatever your contract is, and then somebody's awarded it on the evaluation of a tender committee, whoever that is. The people who did not qualify or who lost have to be notified formally. You lost. This was your qualification criteria. This is why you lost, whatever your evaluation was. You're transparent as possible, and you tell them you have 10 days. There's a 10-day time period in which to challenge or which not to challenge. So people have the right to challenge or not the fact that they did not get it. But by the challenge itself, as far as I understand the Procurement Act, you don't have to accede and say, well, somebody challenged, so I cancel the whole tender and throw your arms up in the air and start all over again. If you are satisfied and confident in the transparency of your process, whomever won, and I know a Chinese company was one that won one of the bids. If you're confident in the transparency of the process, stand by the evaluation process that was utilized. Now, because two companies challenged it, which is their entitlement under the Procurement Act, you're going to throw your arms up in the air. This is how I'm seeing it. I'm sure that HDC will defend themselves otherwise. I don't know. Okay, but we canceling the tender. Because somebody challenges doesn't mean that they have a valid challenge. It is their right to challenge, but you can go through the process. So how do things move on? Because there will always be somebody disgruntled that they didn't achieve or get something. What? You cancel the tender every time? In something that is as urgent as housing? For all the people who are out there scrambling for housing?
And it's a lot of people.
It gets me annoyed. There's a backlog of what, 200,000, 300,000, whatever the amount is. There's data. And people who are on lists for decades. And we can't even fulfill that.
The other thing, Richard, the other part of that, the reason for that cancellation given, you know what's disturbed me about this? Is that these state agencies were aware the procurement legislation was a long overdue process that took a while to get through Parliament. And even after it got through Parliament, people were asking, it is being debated. There's a timeline. Get your houses in order. Start getting your houses in order. Questions were asked in Parliament over and over about the percentage of state agencies and government ministries that were ready for procurement should it pass in Parliament and become law. And the numbers were abysmally low all the time. It eventually passes, and most of them weren't ready. And now these things are happening. That's what upsets me even more about it.
Yeah.
That they have whole legal departments that weren't getting ready, and they got caught off guard. It had to be the full proclamation and enactment had to be postponed because they weren't ready, and they're still ain't ready.
And if there is a valid reason to cancel the tender, what was your evaluation process as an agency, which connects to what you're saying, Paul? What you didn't
is why they have legal departments, which is why the procurement regulator were holding consultations with state agencies, government ministries, way before the bill passed and was proclaimed and enacted. We should open the phone lines.
Yeah, I mean, if the evaluation committee say, okay, we can't make a decision, and it's 3 people that we think tie, I could understand you saying, okay, let's cancel the tender and start again. You awarded it.
222 talk.
So, I don't know. I don't know what I get upset about things like that for, but
And
you know why? Because, yeah.
You know, I do remember them numbers. Come now.
Yeah, 222 talk, 222-8255, and North Americans 866-525-1099. I just find for a country that has had so much money that people should be in housing across this country. People should not be wanting for
A
proper.
lot of the money was squandered over many decades, Richard.
Yes.
And misused and mismanaged. And so when we say we have a lot of money, billions and trillions pass through this country, but a lot of it has been mismanaged, misused, and stolen.
Mm-hmm.
All right, the phone lines are open. 641-19 before 7 o'clock. Good morning
Yep.
to Trinidad and Tobago. Coming up later on this morning, we have Professor Christopher Ora talking about mpox after 7 a.m.
Good morning, caller.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
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 This single parent issue has just pissed me off. I have taken care of 2 children all by myself without the fathers, no aunt, no godmother, no uncle, no nobody, and they turn out fine. So I think that they should lock up that parent, just like how they start to do abroad. Let them do something with those parents, because there is a lot more parents that encouraging this nonsense that have us in the situation where we are today. They used to say, take care of your boys, take care of your children. Have a nice day.
Same
All
to
right.
you.
Thank you so much, San Fernando. Good morning, caller.
Yeah, man.
Good morning.
It's unfortunate that the opposition leader to use this ethnic tension, where I think there are so many other directions. You know what I mean? We have Chit Samaru, we have Chakari. There's a whole list of people from all races in the pan movement, playing the pan and making a living off of the pan, and that is where you decide to go. It's so Trumpian. It's like, what's up with that? And there's so many ways you could have approached that. Different ways if it didn't you have an issue about it. But it is a sad thing. The thing with the parents, like I said, I will always say anybody could become a parent, and parent needs.
Anybody could make a child. Not everybody can be a parent.
Well, de facto, you become a parent, and the thing is, it can be
A parent to me has a particular requirement. A parent is somebody who takes care of the child and the focus on the child's growth and development. A baby mother, a baby father is something different.
Okay, well, you see, you are the baby mother, baby father, but they are parents. I will say that, okay, well, we will go down that road in this definition, but people are parents, and they are good parents, they are bad parents. I don't know about that, because I've gone through 10 years, I've seen men issues with parents in all sorts of, from all classes and all backgrounds, who had it all, went to the best schools, they had the good things, they had the food, they sat down with the thing, and they still had tensions with their parents. You were saying parents as good thing, they were all that, and they were all the trouble. End up in the hospital, life coping, and they had to reach out for help. So people, in the end of the day, always need support. In one way, you might have money financially to go to the high-end counselors and do the high-end and pay for your therapy and pay for the counseling and pay for that assistance. Whereas there's another group of people who may not have those kind of resources or well-being or understanding. So there's a kind of support that some people need and some people may not need.
I find you shouldn't have
right.
a license to be a
They are
parent.
all parents.
Yeah. Thank you.
I feel that before you procreate, you should go and get a license and get a course. And then you get stamped to be a parent.
Good morning.
Yes, good morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
About racial tension with this thing. You know, I don't understand why UNC always bring up these kind of things. Why that does? I just don't see where that fits into this thing. Though there was an issue already. Hello?
You go ahead.
Yeah, there was an issue with PAN at time I can remember, where one of the leaders represented that PAN was not a national instrument, and they was taking PAN for a certain section of the country and saying that while our children studying in school, all your children studying PAN. Those kind of things, and then there was another time with the talk about PAN was not um for independence celebration. TASA, Attorney General, then Attorney General at the time said that he could now attend to the independence celebration because it now includes TASA. And PAN was, I just don't understand why they just have to bring up these things all the time in everything. The CCJ, everything, you have to bring up this race nonsense. And the thing about with children, people just talk about children bringing up and children. What you mean? They are children with electricity, internet, good home, nice bed to sleep on, and they're doing all kind of nonsense. There was a young lady, I think she didn't have no hand or no foot, no electricity, and she got a PhD. No hand, no foot.
I suppose one of the issues
Thank you, Colin.
one of the issues of that state symbol thing is, do you think that the opposition should have been consulted in the change of a national symbol?
It's a good question.
That's a good question, Richie Rich.
Because it's a state symbol.
Yeah, it's a state symbol.
So do you think they should have been consulted as part of the process before articulating a change of the national symbol?
That's a good question. And although the Prime Minister did say that it has to go to Parliament, but the government has the majority, obviously, in the past through. But then that's a fait accompli as opposed to having a consultation on it. You're right. So maybe that's the question this morning. Yeah, it was Ragoobarsingh.
Yes, I have papers here.
Could you share them with us, please, the headlines?
Sure. So I'll start with the Daily Express, and I'll start with, first of all, giving you the date, because I know some of you are doing have an idea what date is. And I'll tell you what day it is. It is the 20th of August, 2024. And I want to say good, happy birthday to my dear friend Lisa Cohen out in Manhattan. Good morning, Lisa. I know sometimes you listen. So happy birthday to you if you are listening. I know it's your birthday. And I know, well, I'll call you later anyway. So ship shape. Historians welcome removal of Columbus vessels from National Coat of Arms. Ship shape. That's the main headline on the Daily Express. The main picture is that of, what is this? Cesar Galindo is all smiles after he was present with migrant student exemption letter, with his migrant student exemption letter by Education Minister Nan Gabsby-Dolly during a ceremony at the Ministry of Education, Port of Spain yesterday. So this is he's one of the migrant children that will be attending school. Apparently, it's a ridiculously low number from one of the well, anyway, I'll get to that headline. And on the back page, no guarantee. Minister, school repairs a complex matter. From UNC to PNM is the picture, so I'm not so sure what that is about. But that was quick. Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley sent poses with ex-United National Congress councillor Jason Alley. So that's the main picture. As I said, news is on the back page of the Express now rather than sports. So you have to go in to see what the main sports story is. And it's what's next for Basarath. CWI searching again for a vice president. And that's the main sports story in the Express. The Guardian for today, in front page. Mixed reactions to coat of arms change. Kamla urges caution, afraid it can stir up ethnic divisions. Only 23 migrant children starting school in September. And man who ran over and killed ex-lover appears in court. I'm on the back page of the Guardian today. Basarath steps down. CWI to hold fresh elections for VP position. So that's the front and the back of the Guardian, the Newsday today, front page. What did they go with? Nearly 2,000 migrant children left out. 23 Venezuelans to start school. I don't understand how that's possible.
Isn't that amazing? But it I was surprised when I saw it. But then remember, it's only children of registered migrants.
Yeah.
So while you may be here and your child may be here, if you're not registered under the formal situation, you're not going to be allowed in schools because the government can't take any other route. It'll be encouraging illegality.
So anyway, there's Kiyomi Makano. There's a picture of a young boy, and his summer camp friends have a yoga session. So this is children enjoying, according to the Newsday, at a summer camp. No profit from 50% of NP gas stations. No profit from 50% of NP gas stations. And on the back page of the Newsday, Basser advocates position after Guyana court ruling, CWI to elect new VP, and Dutton, I missed West Indies cricket. And that's it for our 3 dailies this morning.
All righty. Thank you so much, Richie Rich. Let's get into the results of our morning poll, where we asked you yesterday, do you agree with the removal of the Nina, Pinta, and Santa Maria from the Trinidad and Tobago coat of arms and replace them with the steel pan? 71%, 71 said no. All right, so let's get into this morning's poll. We had one there a second ago. So let's get into that. Of course, you can start dialing 222-8255. North Americans, toll free, 866-525-1099. Of course, the poll is up on our screen already. The question for you this morning:
should the opposition have been consulted before the announcement of the impending change to replace Columbus vessels with the steel pan on TNT's coat of arms? That's our poll this morning. What do you think? Should the opposition have been consulted before the announcement of the impending change to replace Columbus vessels with the steel pan on TNT's coat of arms? That's our poll this morning. The voting can now begin. 222-TALK, 222-8255. North Americans, 866-525-1099. People on our streaming platforms, you can send your votes via the messaging portals there. And if you're watching us on M&E TV or listening to us on smart devices, wherever you're listening to us from, you can also WhatsApp at 318-1021. Of course, if you're outside TNT, you put the 868 code before it. 868-318-1021.
Let's grab our first call. Good morning.
Good morning, gentlemen. Brampton City, my answer is yes.
All righty. Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Gentlemen. I said no, because everything you invite them to, it's supposed to take part in, is the opposition.
All right. Thank you. Let's see. Hanif Daniel says yes. Jean Clark says no. Hector, yes. Richard P. Knight, no. Vianney Warwood, no. Mrs. R, no. Keith Bissessa, yes. Adonna Clark, yes. Roland Badur, no. David Wares, no. Rena Boodoo Jennings, no. Beefy Smith in Goodwood, Tobago, yes. Finbar Collins says no. RR79 says yes. Let's move to WhatsApp.
You're not doing your job.
Kenwin says yes. Anthony in Toronto, yes. Black Pearl, thank you, Black Pearl. No. Lenny James, no. Cascade St. Anne's, yes. Roger Seawing, yes. Good morning to Vincent in Birmingham, England. Junior, yes. Kathy Ann, no. Let's see. Joe Sam, yes. Carol Guevara, no. Good morning, caller.
Good morning. No.
Thank you. Just a nice guy says no. Julia S. Batiste say yes. Michael Robinson in Japan, yes. Anyhow, Miguel, no. Slick Money Grip, no. Cheryl Henry, hell no. Thank you. Should the opposition have been consulted before the announcement of the impending change to replace Columbus's vessels with the steel pan on Trinidad and Tobago coat of arms? Yes or no? Morning, Lorna. Morning, Carly. Morning, Indy. Says yes.
Who says yes? Who says yes?
Lorna says yes.
Oh, okay.
Carlton Lou says yes. Patrick Smith. Good morning, Patrick. Hell no. Jaron says yes to the poll. All right. 222-8255. Toll free for North Americans. 866-525-1099. On WhatsApp, 318-1021. To our PBX lines in studio, 222-8255. All right.
So should the opposition have been consulted before the announcement of the impending change to replace Columbus vessels with the steel pan on TNT's coat of arms? That's our poll this morning. What do you think? All right. 222-8255, North Americans, 866-525-1099. You can send your votes via the messaging portal on all the streaming platforms, and you can also WhatsApp us at 318-1021.
Yeah. All right. You have 2 minutes again to vote before our major news, anchored by Evie. All right. Should the opposition have been consulted before the announcement of the impending change to replace Columbus vessels with the steel pan on TNT's coat of arms? Yes or no? Carlton Lewis saying it should have been discussed with the public as well. Okay. Trinidad Margot says yes. David Nelson. What did David say here? Yes. All right. Thank you, David. Oh, Lord. Vianney, behave yourself. Behave. You get her like Richard now. Up north says yes. So you get anybody down south? All right. Coming up next hour, we'll chat with Professor Aura
about mpox.
Yeah.
Another
again, no mpox.
Another myself has said they're screaming.
Just a question, because I don't know. Is mpox different than monkeypox? It's different.
I think it is that.
Okay, I was just curious as to why.
Now that you ask, I'm starting to doubt myself, but
I think one of the things the WHO started to do is take away the names of animals and places from these viruses, so it doesn't stereotype the animal, you know.
Yeah.
But we'll ask Professor Aura. I was confused as to, is this monkeypox?
I think it is.
I assumed it was, but you're right. I'm not sure. Not 100%. So I'll be taking your votes on our poll this morning. Should the opposition have been consulted before the announcement of the impending change to replace Columbus's vessels with the steel pan on TNT's coat of arms? I suppose it raises. I suppose anytime you're dealing with a state symbol, should there be a committee that deals with that?
And then the question:
or should it be a purely political decision? You know, what do you want?
No matter what happens in this country, we'll have argument.
Always. All right, let's get into our 7 o'clock major news on this, the 20th day of August. Evie is in.
This is your news bulletin from Power 102 Digital.
The opposition leader says removing Columbus ships from this country's coat of arms needs to be carefully thought out. 23 Venezuelan children to enter school at the start of the new school term, but hundreds left out. National Petroleum Chairman Sahid Hossain says the company is not making money on more than half of its gas stations. Call for urgent action to address the departure of large amounts of U.S. currency from TNT. An opinion poll shows Kamala Harris leads Donald Trump. Details in a moment. I'm Afril Sintel Bob. This is news at 7 o'clock on Power 102 Digital. Good morning. Opposition leader Kamala Persad-Bissassa believes that while some of the history behind Christopher Columbus has to be revisited, Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley's promise to remove his ships from this country's coat of arms needs to be carefully thought out. This is because she believes, if not handled properly, it can ignite racial tensions in Trinidad and Tobago. In a statement yesterday addressing the plan to remove the Nina, Pinta, and Santa Maria from the national emblem and replace them with a steel pan, Persad-Bissassa acknowledged that Columbus was wrongfully celebrated for some time. However, she said she is of the belief that sanitizing history, truth, and free speech in the modern era of wokeness, virtue signaling, and cancel culture will only promote ignorance and foster the repetition of evil acts in the future that can be preventable. Persad-Bissassa said erasing history by removing symbols will not improve or change citizens' understanding of history, adding that the nation's true history should be taught in schools, one that provides the good and bad of all historical figures. More than $2 billion is needed to address problems at the nation's public schools. However, the funding is not available at this time to undertake such a move. Minister of Education Dr. Nyan Gatsby-Dolly indicates repair to schools is done on an ongoing basis. The update was given during a news briefing held on Monday afternoon.
It is not a comfortable position that we don't have all of the funding that is required to fix every school up to the level we would like to. For that, we would need more than $2 billion at this point in time. We do not have that available. And therefore, we operate on a triage-like system where we address the most important and critical issues first to ensure that all schools are in operation as far as possible.
She admitted that issues can come up at schools across the country at any time, and attention is being placed on addressing issues which arise. It was noted the most important issues are dealt with first by contractors, and the afternoons and weekends are used to carry out remedial work as well.
School repair is an ongoing thing. It is a reduction in the complexity of understanding how important it is and how continuous it is to ask that kind of question. And I keep emphasizing that to the media. To say that all schools will be ready. We can say all schools are ready. And on the night before school opens, a sewer system goes down, a tank, a pipe bursts, and that will make that school not ready to open. So we do not reduce it in those things.
Trinidad and Tobago schools will open their doors to 23 Venezuelan children next month. However, hundreds of others will not be a part of the education system. Of the 23 children approved, 4 will be placed at government schools, 18 at denominational schools, and 1 at a private school. Education Minister Dr. Nyan Gatsby-Dolly listed all the preparations, legal, administrative, and educational, to admit the young migrants. But Minister of National Security Fitzgerald Hines told reporters that about 2,000 Venezuelan minors were now in TNT, including those not registered as migrants. The duo spoke at a ceremony at the ministry on August 19th to present the parents of Venezuelan children with migrant student exemption letters. Chief Education Officer Dr. Peter Smith said the ministry had approved 111 Venezuelan children, of whom 23 were permitted to attend school in the new academic year. Hines said the schooling was aimed at children of Venezuelan migrants legally registered in TNT in 2019. Economist Mala Dukaran is of the view more effort is needed to address massive departure of U.S. currency from TNT every year. She cautioned that this situation could have serious complications. Dukaran described as unacceptable the $2 billion leaving the nation annually. She is suggesting all be done to address the situation and call for the political will to do so. The advisor noted that many citizens are still facing difficulties in getting U.S. currency, adding the authorities are aware of the situation. Her remarks were made while speaking during the Hard Talk program on Monday afternoon.
Now, the fact that it has been occurring since 2011, I know for sure that the authorities are aware of it. The IMF has talked about it, and yet still there is no alarm raised. There is no meaningful policy agenda to address it. Tells me that there isn't the political will to fix it, and I don't know why. $2 billion leaving the country every year and is unacceptable when the average person, when they go to the bank and they have to travel or they can't get $200, but $2 billion is leaving our country unaccounted for on average every year.
National Petroleum Chairman Sahid Hussain says the company is not making money on more than half of its gas stations. He was speaking at a media conference on August 19th at the Marriott Courtyard Hotel in Port of Spain. Hussain said NP's service station network consists of 117 active service stations, of which 65 are profitable for the operator but uneconomical for NP. He explained this is due mostly to the location of the service stations in small, far-flung communities such as Cedras, Toko, Mayaro, Ikakas, and Maruga, and explained that these community sites are subsidized by NP. You are listening to news on Power 102 Digital to 7 o'clock. United States President Kamala Harris, or Vice President Kamala Harris, is leading former President Donald Trump as she prepares for her headline moment at the Democratic National Convention, according to opinion polling. On the eve of the convention in Chicago, Harris holds a lead of between 3 and 6% points in the race for the White House. Two opinion polls showed Harris is ahead of Trump by 49 to 45% among registered voters and 51 to 45% among likely voters in a two-way race, according to an ABC News Washington Post Ipsos poll. Al Jazeera is following the story.
Kamala Harris arrived in Pittsburgh along with the torrential rain, a literal and a political storm here in Pennsylvania. Not in this hangar. They love her here.
It's exciting. It's exciting. I feel like the same way I did when Obama was running.
But those buses parked for a reason, a road trip in part of this crucial and divided state to mobilize voters.
In Pennsylvania, it's can we get out all the Democrats? If you can get the vote out, you can win.
Straight into weather news now for the period today till midnight. Trinidad and Tobago, predominantly hot, sunny and hazy conditions. There is a low chance of isolated afternoon heavy showers or thunderstorms favoring western coastal areas of Trinidad. Tonight will be mostly fair and hazy. Please note that gusty winds and street or flash flooding may occur near heavy showers or thunderstorms. There is also a moderate concentration of Sahara dust present. Persons who are sensitive to this change in air quality are being advised to take the necessary precautions. You can expect a very warm, dare I say hot day today. 34 degrees Celsius high at Piarco International Airport and 33 degrees Celsius at Crown Point, Tobago. Currently, according to Steve, it's 28 degrees Celsius both at Piarco International Airport and Crown Point in Tobago. Recapping your headlines to 7 o'clock. The opposition leader says removing Columbus ships from this country's coat of arms needs to be carefully thought out. 23 Venezuelan children to enter school at the start of the new term, hundreds left out. National Petroleum Chairman Sahid Hussain says the company is not making money on more than half of its gas stations. A call for urgent action to address departure of large amounts of U.S. currency from TNT, and opinion polls show Kamala Harris leads Donald Trump. I'm Avril Sintilbab. That was news to 7 o'clock on Power 102 Digital. Look out for more news in detail coming up at 12 noon today and an update at 8 o'clock this morning. For more details, log on to power102fm.com.
Up to date and credible. Power 102 Digital.
All right. Thank you so much, Avril, for our major news. You could join her again come 8 o'clock for our news brief. Traffic-wise, leaving south, heading north on the Solo, Couva to Sugar Guardas, Trinidad City to UE, just volume the Eastern Main Road after you pass Mount Hope and get into Port of Spain, a little traffic. Not too bad. All right. So let's see if we have any more votes here. Let's see. We got Fareed Ali saying yes. Marsha Thomas says yes. Good morning, Marsha. Hope all is well. And okay, and that's it. All right, let's get the results. Let me rewind, wheel and come again. And the results of our morning poll.
He should carry a microphone in that little room, you know.
Tell me something, Steve. Did you give any additional votes? Because I may have missed those if you did.
I did.
What were they? Because the
Marsha Thomas said yes. Fareed Ali says yes. Anthony Tinto says yes. And that's what I got.
Okay. All right. Well, great. So now I have so you had 43 people voting on the poll this morning.
Mm-hmm.
Of the 43 people, our poll this morning, of course, was should the opposition have been consulted before the announcement of the impending change to replace Columbus vessels with a steel pan on TNT's coat of arms. 43 people voted on the poll this morning. In the allotted time of the 43 people, 24 of you said yes, they should have been consulted, and 19 of you said no. So the yeas have it this morning, but by a small margin. And in fact, for a lot of the poll, it was pretty much even. There was 50% saying yes and 50% saying no. But the yeses moved ahead. And so the yeses now outweigh the no's in terms of yes, the opposition. So they're saying yes, the opposition should have been consulted. So that's our results. Of course, you can continue to vote in the poll throughout the day, through our programming, and we give you the final results tomorrow morning, which will be Wednesday and midweek in the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago.
Hump Day Wednesday. All right. Of course, our guest, we're just waiting for him to log on here, is Professor Aura. And I got a message just now. Let me see if I can find it here. Yeah. Mpox was formerly called monkeypox. We'll confirm all that with Professor Aura. Thank you, Anthony. All right. I guess Professor Aura is not on as yet.
No, he's not.
Let me just give him a nudge.
I think post 1962, there should be a process by which symbols can be changed.
That's a very good idea. Symbols, something as because it's a significant change. It's not a minor change.
So you know that there's a process.
But isn't there a national committee for emblems, symbols, holidays, and all of that? I think there's a committee for symbols, emblems, and all of that, flags. I think there's supposed to be, as far as I remember, a committee that deals with all of those things and the maintenance and the protocols, a national symbols and emblems committee or something of that nature. I could be wrong, but I think I remember something like that. Anyway. Typical Trinidad to make everything have to be a bacchanal. The prices of some food items have gone down while some have gone up. The food and non-alcohol beverage index increased by 0.7% because of the upward prices in whole fresh chicken, Irish potatoes, soybean oil, plantain, frozen whole chicken, table margarine, eggs, okras, carrot, and dasheen. Prices of all of those went up. However, the prices of pumpkin, tomatoes, aubergine or melangen, white flower celery, grapes, green sweet peppers, melon, mixed fresh seasoning and garlic went down in July compared to last year. Good morning, Professor Ora.
Good morning. Can you hear me? Okay.
Loud and clear.
Indeed, we can.
Good.
Could you
Good
tilt
morning,
your-
everybody. How are you all?
Not bad at all. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Not too bad. I'm over in the UK at the moment, coming back to Trinidad on Sunday. On
Oh,
Sunday.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's warm both places. Well, it's warm-ish both places.
It's not been too bad the last few days.
Thank you for joining us this morning. We wanted to have a discussion on mpox. First of all, I asked a question earlier on, and maybe you could clarify if and why it changed from monkeypox to mpox.
I think they decided that they didn't want to use the term monkey anymore. I'm not sure. It's a good question. I wouldn't like to say exactly why they did it, but maybe it was something to do with the term monkey and the fact that it does spread to other species as well, like humans. So they didn't want people to think that it just affected monkeys. So maybe they just used mpox, but I'm not 100% sure.
But it's the same thing, right?
It's the same thing, exactly. It's just the names changed.
All right. The World Health Organization, WHO, has recently declared mpox as a health emergency of international concern. What does that mean?
It means really when something is spreading from country to country, and the World Health Organization wants countries to up their game and be aware that this is something they need to take note of. They need to get their diagnostics sorted. They need to get their get better prepared because they feel that it's a risk to people. This is in Africa, people in countries around. So they do this really so countries up their preparation. And their knowledge around the virus.
Is this one of the protocols that came out of how the world dealt with COVID-19 and the WHO being more precautious than before?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think whenever there's a virus that that they start to worry about is spreading from country to country, is spreading more in people, they consider, they get a committee together and they consider whether they're going to declare it actually a national emergency, a potential national emergency. So it's something they've been doing this kind of thing for years. They did it for COVID. The first monkeypox outbreak, which is around 2022, they also did it then. So it's really getting countries to realize that there is an issue here and they need to take note of it, and they need to start preparing, maybe getting in vaccines, making sure they can diagnose it, making sure they get all their information out to the public about how best to prevent its spread and all that kind of thing.
How worried should the average citizen be about this directive from the public health, the World Public Health Organization?
I think certainly in Africa, this is something that people should be take note of and be worried about in the area where the virus is spreading, in the countries where the virus is spreading. Certainly it seems to be spreading more than the previous monkeypox virus type. This is spreading more, especially in kids. It's more likely to spread by direct contact. It's less likely to be just in maybe more spread by sexual contact, which was the previous one. This is actually spreading more by direct contact from person to person. The lesions that this particular virus is causing are more generalized. So it's actually it's kids. Kids are being affected much more in Africa. Around 80% of the new cases are in kids. So whereas previous it was more confined to just sexual contact. So I think in those areas, yes, people should be worried. And also, this is a virus that people can bring with them. So countries outside Africa need to be aware that There is a risk of people, as we saw in Sweden last week, people bringing the virus with them, and then onward spread. So we all need to take note of what's happening. We don't need to panic. This is not COVID-19. This is not a virus that's spread by aerosol infection. So it's not spread in the air. Remember, in COVID, it sits around in rooms after people have left and spreads through the air like influenza. This is not like that. It's spread by direct contact, close contact. So it's not going to spread as dramatically. It's going to be easier to control, but it's still a risk because, people close contact, it can spread. So we all around the world have to be aware that this virus is spreading and try to stop it from coming in. And if it does come in, we need to have our procedures in place to be able to stop its spread if it does come into, for example, Trinidad and Tobago.
Is there a preventable vaccine for mpox, or is it that there is a treatable vaccine?
It's a preventable. There's a preventable vaccine available for it. Yes, I mean these pox viruses. There's almost a pox virus for every species. I always say to my students, we've got sheep pox, goat pox, monkey pox, rabbit pox, mouse pox. And those pox viruses sometimes spread to different species as well, but they sort of like it. They're more happy in their individual species that they're named after. But what's nice about pox viruses is you often have the immunity in one species is shared with another. So you get cross protection, what we call cross protection. And the good thing about monkeypox is that vaccine that we used many years ago for smallpox, which is a very similar virus, the vaccines that we generated and used for smallpox are effective at preventing monkeypox as well. So we can use those types of vaccine very safely, and they would prevent monkeypox. And in fact, in vulnerable populations, people around the world, people are getting vaccinated with these vaccines.
What are the symptoms, and is it deadly?
It's not deadly, although in some cases, especially with this new strain that we have in Africa, this one, there are some people that do succumb to it. I think around. I saw some statistics around 16,000 people had been diagnosed with monkeypox, of which around 4,000 had died, which is about 4%. Now, we have to remember that's in an African scenario where there's lots of underlying health conditions, lots of issues that might be contributing towards those deaths. And it may well be that it wouldn't be the same mortality rates in somewhere like Trinidad and Tobago or UK or somewhere like that. But the virus basically causes flu-like symptoms to start with, fatigue, headache, and then it causes what is called pathognomonic, or what is specific with this virus is it then causes like rash and bumps. Those bumps are sometimes confined to the hands and the feet and the genital regions, but with this virus, they can spread a bit further. And those bumps are like spots. So the bumps start as a little rash, and then they raise up into bumps, and then like a spot, like a chicken pox, they burst. They say burst. They have a sort of like pus. They burst open. And that's where the virus is inside that. As the spot opens up and becomes like a pustule, that's when the virus is able to come out and infect. And after that, it scabs over, and then in the majority of cases, you'll get resolution, and the virus won't spread anymore. So the virus is spread, especially at that stage when these spots are erupting. Lots of virus, so they can go onto blankets, they can go onto towels, they can go onto people's hands, and that's where you get the direct contact where the virus is. So those are the kind of symptoms you get. It doesn't usually kill, but but in some cases, people have died from it in a limited amount of cases.
The issue of persons protecting themselves, you said it's spread by direct contact. Why seemingly are children more vulnerable? Is it because their immune systems aren't as developed in many cases?
Not so much that. I think the reason why is the practices. For example, the sharing of towels, the sharing of bedding, the sharing of clothes, the fact that they don't wash their hands so much and they're playing with each other. They maybe don't, there's lots of social practices that kids might have. Like in Africa, there's a lot of boarding schools and all the kids are very close together in dormitories and washing rooms and things like that. So they're more likely to get to spread a virus by that direct contact. I think their immune system, certainly when you get to I don't, as far as I'm aware, it's not really the fact that their immune system is compromised in any way. Although certain people who do, like we remember talking about with COVID, if you are immunocompromised, and that can be kids or adults, you can be more susceptible to monkeypox, like with any other virus. But I think it's the practices of the kids that make it more likely that this kind of virus, which is passed by this kind of direct contact, is more likely to spread from child to child.
So this is not something that you could screen for. I know the Ministry of Health has indicated that they'll be screening, I assume, visitors coming into the country or some version of that. But I'm thinking, but how are they going to do that? Because you may be not symptomatic at all at the point that you enter and then it erupts. Is there a screening process for it?
Not really. I mean, what I think probably the Ministry of Health are thinking about is they're going to target people coming in who have traveled to certain countries where the virus is spreading, and then asking them key questions, like screening them through questions of have they had contact with anybody that might have had monkeypox, have they got any lesions, any bumps in their body, and if so, they would then probably get a doctor to take a look at them. So it's that kind of screening through questionnaires, through questions, rather than actually sort of taking people aside and examining them, I think. But that's carried out quite a lot. Is you carry out a risk-based screening by knowing where people have been and whether they're likely to have had contact with the virus, and then ask them key questions and keep an eye on them if they have, if it's likely that they think they might. It's important that they keep a very close eye on themselves, and for any symptoms that might be monkeypox. And if they do get symptoms, they immediately seek medical help or go to the doctor. So I think it's that kind of screening at the airport that they'll be doing.
Right.
So people should not sit down and say, well, I will ride this through. They should admit, and I think the Ministry of Health has said so, they should seek immediate medical attention.
I think that's really critical, because how you stop this kind of virus spreading, because it's not that easily spread, as I've said before, is one of the key things, like we talked about with COVID, is isolation of infected cases, because that's how it spread. It's quite easy, as long as that person is isolated, nobody has direct contact with them, and that's close direct contact, or their towels that they use and their bedding that they use, so they're kept aside for a limited period of time, to probably about 3 weeks, until any lesions they have on their body have fully resolved. Then they won't be infectious anymore. So I think it's really, really important that people, if they have been in an area where they or part of the world where they might have picked it up, to really keep a close eye on their potential symptoms, and then they seek medical help, because then it's very unlikely that they will spread it to anybody else.
Right. If we could just move quickly to dengue. We have a dengue situation in Trinidad and Tobago. Is it that dengue is seasonal, just for the purposes of the audience, and of course, we're in the rainy season, and it is spread by the Aedes aegypti mosquito. How many parts of the world are going through this dengue situation at the moment?
Oh, gosh, I mean, there's a big dengue resurgence or assurgence, or it's around the world. I mean, I've been reading about lots of different countries around the world, South America, but also Asia, where dengue is causing all sorts of problems. From a seasonal, your seasonal question, it is usually because of the nature of these Aedes mosquitoes. They breed and they like moist conditions. They breed in moist conditions. They're usually during the rainy season. There's more breeding. However, there is a however here. Where because these Aedes mosquitoes are quite they love biting humans, as we know, and they tend to stick around people's houses close to humans. You know, they're these are the ones for your listeners, are the ones with the little white spots on them. They have white spots on their legs and their body. You can see them, and they're the ones that are really quite nasty. They keep on coming back and biting you. We all know that. So I think it's important to note that even in the dry season, these are around the houses, and they're breeding in little pools of water that you might have around your house. This is what they breed in, like if flower pots, or if you have a flower pot with a tray below it which fills up with water, they can breed in those, or waste products or tires if you have them sitting around. They really like those kind of areas close to houses. And if you have lots of those receptacles where you have water sitting around after rain, you're likely to have far more of these mosquitoes, these Aedes mosquitoes, coming around and biting you. So that's why I know the Ministry of Health and everybody are really keen for people to go out into their vicinities of their houses and look around for areas where water might be pooling, and make sure you turn the flower pot over, or you turn the thing over so there's no opportunity for this to happen. Because even in the dry season, you can get breeding of mosquitoes in these. But it is seasonal. It usually occurs in the wet season. And yeah, it seems to be, sadly, one of these many vector-borne diseases or mosquito-borne disease viruses that are increasing in relation to climate change, because there's all sorts of factors that result in dengue increasing, and I'm afraid also the temperature rises that we're seeing enables the virus to transmit through the mosquito faster, so it can go through more cycles in the mosquito, so you get more spread. So there's, you have to have a number of things there. You have to have water, you have to have temperature, you have to have the mosquitoes, you have to have the people. But when those are all there together, and you get these effects of climate change, you get the flooding we've been seeing, and you get the increase at high temperatures you were seeing, I'm afraid this is why dengue is probably increasing, and it's going to increase in the years to come.
Are you ready to take some calls, Professor?
Sure.
All right.
222-8255. North Americans, 866-525-1099. That's our numbers directly into our studio.
Our guest is Professor Christopher Orr. We're talking about mpox and dengue. Are there any other situations that the world and virologists like yourself are monitoring? Because we're very attuned to these developments around the world now since COVID-19.
I just talked about the vector-borne diseases, and so we're looking quite carefully about vector-borne diseases around the world, because of the nature of the fact that climate change...
Just to interject, I saw a report last week that suggested that more than half of U.S. states have seen an uptick in COVID-19. And
yes.
If you see that, why is that happening? Is it that we dropped our guard? Is it that there's some new variant?
What's happening is the virus is still doing what it's been doing from the start. It's still adapting and changing. And remember, we've talked a long time about, some viruses, you get solid immunity for a long period of time, even life once you get infected. But with other viruses like COVID-19, when they change, that immunity that we get that stops us from getting infected again is quite reasonably transient. When I say transient, probably only a few months, because then the virus has changed a bit. So, and the immunity just reduces over time. So what happens is we see it all the time with these kind of viruses. Is you see waves of infection, and those waves of infection happen due to the fact that our immune system has waned, and so we've become susceptible again, but also the virus changes. So you tend to get these sort of upticks and downticks and upticks and downticks. So we're seeing more COVID-19 now, which is, in some cases a bit of a surprise, because it's the summer. You wouldn't expect to see so much, but it's not necessarily just happens in the winter. Usually there's more opportunities for spread of viruses like aerosol infectious viruses like COVID-19 in the winter, but we're seeing uptick all around the world. So this is something to be expected, I'm afraid.
Yeah. I suppose what Paul is also asking, is there any other virus lurking in the distance?
There's a virus called Oropouche virus, and we all know about Oropouche virus. It was named after what's found in Vega de Oropouche, as we all know, is in Trinidad. Many years ago, it was identified, I think in the 60s or 50s, by a group of virologists. And this virus, I'm afraid, is now spreading as one of the viruses like dengue and chickpea and Oropouche, transmitted by in similar areas, but it's transmitted actually by a midge rather than a biting midge rather than a mosquito. And we're having all sorts of quite a lot of issues with that in South America, in Brazil, in Venezuela. And that's a virus that seems to be spreading and might also be infected by, caused by climate change as well, or the fact that it's increased. So it's something we need to keep an eye on. And I think I mentioned last time as well about the avian flu. When we spoke about, we need to keep a very close eye on avian flu as well as one to watch, because that's spreading very dramatically around the world in birds, in wild birds, but also in mammals, and also in things like cows and cats and things like that. So it's jumping species, and we're just hoping, keeping our fingers crossed and keeping a very close eye on it, that that's not going to jump into humans and then gain the ability to spread from human to human. That's not happened so far, and we hope it's not going to happen.
Prior to, one of my questions is, what on earth is a biting midge? But before you answer that, it was prior to COVID-19. I think the stuff of movies and that viruses can be one of the possible existential threats to the human species, has been the stuff of sci-fi, and its ability to bring the world to a halt was so evident of COVID-19 that I think for the modern human, it's very much a real thing now, because COVID-19 transformed the world in so many ways, and so it's very much a something that we can see that can happen, in terms of how COVID affected and so many millions of people dying. In fact, I think you'd be hard pressed to find somebody who doesn't know somebody who's died from COVID. So I suppose there's a lot more vigilance from the average citizen or average person about what's next. But getting back to the midge, what's a biting midge? I don't know.
Yeah, a biting midge. Well, it's one of those. It's a different species to the mosquitoes. They look much smaller. And we get them at dusk and dawn. And they actually, some people call them no-see-ums, because you don't really see them because they're very small. And we have them especially we have lots and lots in the UK, but we do have them in the Caribbean and in Trinidad as well. They're really small, biting, little tiny ones that when you might see them just as almost a little bit of a black on your finger when you kill it. And they bite your head and things like that at dusk and dawn. And they transmit viruses as well, sadly. There's loads and loads of different species of these midges that transmit loads and loads of different viruses to humans and to animals. And they're around us all the time.
Professor Ora, how many viruses are known to mankind?
Oh, God. There are, known to mankind, there are thousands of viruses, but I tell you what, there are thousands and thousands more that are not known to mankind that we still have to discover. Because we have these set up in Trinidad in Prof. Carrington's lab. We have, Prof. Carrington has systems set up now to do this, what we call deep sequencing, where you can look at every virus in a sample, every virus, and you get discovering new viruses all the time. Now, they're not all, viruses are not always nasty. Some of the viruses are, aren't necessarily going to cause disease, but there's lots and lots and lots of viruses out there that we're discovering all the time. It's the tip of the iceberg. What we know, the viruses that we know, is probably the tip of the iceberg. There are so many out there.
And speaking of iceberg, what's the oldest identification of a virus? Because I know sometimes scientists go to Arctic Circle, Antarctica, and they see, they take samples and they see DNA sequencing of viruses that may have been with us for millennia.
Yeah, exactly. They've been around with us long before us. So, I mean, you look at fossils or amber stones and things like that. Really, things that have been, like with the Egyptian mummies and things like that, many years ago, and you can take DNA from that kind of things. And the hieroglyphics, you can see some of the pictures of people with crutches and clearly they have polio, or you can see the pictures of really old skulls. Which have an indication of pox-like lesions on them and things like that. So yeah, viruses have been around. They're prebiotic. They're actually been around far longer than us. And viruses, bacteria have viruses. They have their own viruses. So it's not just, the viruses have managed, they're the really clever things. They've managed to get into absolutely everything. So, yeah.
Very interesting. All right, Professor, thank you for being with us and clarifying the mpox situation and also dengue. We appreciate your time and, as usual, your knowledge and contribution.
No problem. Anytime.
Thank you so much.
All right, Professor, safe travels back home.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Well, back to our shows. All the best.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
Professor Chris Orr. The phone lines are open.
Yeah.
It's a big question this morning.
He's always interesting to speak with because he has so much knowledge.
Yeah. And incredible knowledge, not just people talking things they don't know. He knows what he's talking about. A program note coming up at 8:05. We'll have a repeat of the interview we did with Brian Manning on property tax, which has gotten quite a few thousand views on our YouTube channel. And Marsha Walker moves to afternoon drive with Hard Talk. So you can check her out at 4:05 this afternoon. So that's just a program note right here on Power 102 Digital. So at 8:05, we'll have a replay of Brian Manning's interview last week, which we did with him on property tax, which is receiving quite a few thousand views, because the information, I guess, is important to people out there as we count down to what's the new deadline? Is it the 31st of August or September?
September 30th.
September 30th, yeah.
It's not a new deadline. It's a deadline on your... I don't know if they're going to change it, because he did indicate that they were going to get to some sort of online payment portal, because you can't have thousands and thousands of people trying to converge on revenue offices trying to pay,
we still wait on digital.
It's a considerable sum for a lot of people, eh?
Yeah, people might think it's $1,000, but a lot of people on fixed incomes, particularly pensioners, and it's onerous for them.
Yeah, it's a considerable amount of money.
It is. We do have a call, gentlemen. Good morning.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
Good morning.
The discussion there with the professor, I didn't really get his name.
Professor Ora.
Yeah, but it reminded me of a training exercise that I went through at the age of 20. And I want to commend him, and I want to commend the station, because for quite a while, I think there's a sort of misunderstanding of the biological environment in which we live. And I thought that his discussion would have made that clear. And in this way, in that he articulated the fact that there is a long ongoing tracking of this biological environment, this epidemiological environment. And I think in his discourse, he was able to highlight the ongoing risk of disease transmission, communicable disease transmission. And I want to really commend him for that. I wish you all could bring him back again. It was interesting listening to him, how he, particularly when he spoke about the fact that climate change was affecting the cycles of the mosquito. And I think a lot of people didn't realize that while the cycle was generally 8 days, is now looking more like 6 days with the change in the climate, you know. Interesting. I just want to say this before I go. While I agree that it would be appropriate for the Prime Minister or the executive to consult with the opposition in such a decision, I think that the track record of the opposition would have more than prompted the Prime Minister to look at the situation and say, hey, I'm not wasting any time, because more important, tangible issues that affect the people, like crime, local government reform, things that they have chosen not to participate in, even this constitution.
But caller, is that a reason though?
Yeah, because
is that a valid reason that you're saying, well, I'm wasting my time? Is that a reason? Is that a proper and sober, intelligent reason?
Yeah, based on the record over the 9 years. You know, if some people choose to say, well, look, we'll meet just to meet.
But the opposition supported the bill. They supported the bail bill. There are certain bills they have supported, and there are certain bills that go before joint select committees.
Let's be realistic. Let's really be realistic. You know, I want to look at it that way, and that's why I said initially that I think it would be appropriate, but under the circumstances, I might give the Prime Minister a slack. You know,
Yeah.
or the
But I'm saying the issue has to be the behavior of state officials. And if it is that there is a process, and I will say that obviously there is no regimented process with regard to the issue, hence it can be done the way it's being done. But if there is a process that we recognize in terms of the structure of the constitutional framework of the Republic, and if there is an issue for consultation, or that there should be a convention of consultation on issues, and then in this particular issue, state symbols, those consultations can happen. And if it is that there is a disagreement, the majority that the government holds moves forward. But is it a valid reason, as you're purporting at that level, considering a state symbol, that I say, well, I am bothering because they're not going to agree anyway? Is that a valid reason in a constitutional framed democracy?
They agree to disagree. I would say yes.
Yeah. Well, we will have to disagree. I think.
Well, you know, the argument is interesting, so because at the end of the day, the opposition would have challenged several bills in the past years, but not offering support to the government's proposal of those bills. But the government continued to bring the bills and achieve success. So because there is a situation at one point where you may have opposition, pardon the pun, it doesn't mean that the opportunity for consultation should be stymied because of a presumed position before you even try. Because in that case, why the government bring back bail bill or other bills and was able to achieve opposition support and success in those instances? So I agree with Richard that while there may be a perception that, well, the opposition does support nothing, because I've seen it on the child running rampant, that doesn't mean on something as significant as this, there should not be some sort of consultation with the official opposition of the country. And people are also saying maybe the wider population as to what they feel. 222 talk.
Yeah, we're taking the calls at this point to talk 222-8255, North Americans 866-525-1019, and of course letting you know that theater is on this weekend, coming from Sapa and Cipriani College. At Cipriani College, we had a lovely time at the Cipriani College over the weekend, and thank you for the hundreds of people who came out to watch the show on Saturday and Sunday. And I'm seeing all of your comments coming into social media yesterday and today still about the show at Cipriani College. So thank you for those wonderful comments. And of course, we now move on to Central Bank Auditorium this weekend. So Port of Spain, yep, we are in town, so to speak. We are in Port of Spain this weekend, Saturday at 8:30 and Sunday at 6:30 at the Central Bank Auditorium. The Central Bank box office is open already, 12 noon to 6 p.m. daily. So it is open, so you can get tickets at the Central Bank Auditorium box office. And of course, tickets available at the usual outlets, K Squared, West Mall, K Squared, Eastgate, K Squared Fashions, Brentwood Mall, Chagonas, Electronics in Arima, Jubilee Railway in Tunapuna, Sharflare Auto Services in Sharflare, and Antoni's Flores at Val Park Shopping Plaza. All of those are the outlets where you can get tickets for the show Lotto Madness on this weekend at Central Bank Auditorium on Saturday and Sunday. Looking forward. Well, Central Bank is always the ultimate home of theater. That's where we started. A lot of us started off at the Central Bank Auditorium. So it's always a very special place in our heart.
All right.
So we love being at Central Bank.
Yep. Good morning, caller.
Morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
Good morning.
I would like to know when Saturn to take the Trinity Cross of his Privy Council. Did they consult anyone? Did he consult anybody to do it? The Trinity Cross. I would like to know. Thank you. All have a blessed day.
That I'll have to dig up on a little bit. I can't remember.
Well, Saf Mirage is doing whatever he does as a private citizen or as the other one organized.
I don't understand the question at all.
There is no equivalency to the constitutional construct of opposition and government.
And Saf Mirage, if you wanted as a private citizen.
Yeah, it's not an equivalency at all. Private citizens could take
Do
whatever
what they want.
But, so I'm not so sure what your equivalency was there. What was the analogy there? But
yeah. Good morning. Good morning.
Hello?
Good morning.
Yeah, I get in a breakup with all the station by morning. 1 minute I could hear what you all saying, next minute it jumble up.
That's on television?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is. I'm watching it here. It's scrambling a little bit and it's going off and on. That is beyond our control.
I didn't hear what how they call him saying just now, Richard. No?
Yeah. Yeah, it's coming and going, kind of. Alrighty.
I don't have a problem with the changing of those 3 ships and putting at least a pan or 3 pan or something. But the rest have to remain because it will have our signs there, the indigenous people signs there, the first people.
Mm-hmm.
The palm tree, the Morich palm tree and the hummingbird, that is our thing. They mustn't interfere with that at all. They don't start interfering with the young fella in Arima. They are already saying he's not a chief and all of that. But we'll fix that in our time. And you all have a good day. Good morning.
All the best here. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning, guys.
Morning.
Good morning.
All who have a problem with the 3 ships being removed, they will soon get over it. When King George V Park was changed to Mandela Park, oh God, it was a big hue and cry. Oh God, how they gonna move history? I am saying, Dr. Rowley, well done. Do what you have to do. We cannot continue with this lie. Right? All these 3 ships came to this country, and is always remember that Calypso by Brother Marvin. I don't know, I'm so glad that man never won that monarch that year. We came on the same ship, on the same trip. What same ship? I never know African people came on the Fatal Razak. What nonsense. Man, look na man. Dr. Rowley.
I think it was something called a metaphor.
Wow. Good. Ships came and lick up the people who were here. That history, we ain't bound to remember it. Or they could put it in a museum.
What, Richard?
Dr. Rowley. They will get over it just as how they got over the change from King George to Mandela Park. Have a blessed morning.
Say it for the people at the back of the class, Richard. What?
A metaphor.
Which is?
Good morning, caller.
Morning, Ben.
Morning.
Good morning,
with the pending change of the ships to the pan, what it is going to cost citizens, because all illegal documents carry the coat of arms on it, with respect to like birth papers, passports. What is going to be the cost? The public or is the government going to absorb those things? That would be my question.
Well, yes, the government has to pay for it, and it's the same cost when they change this ministry to that ministry. If a government changes and changes ministry to that ministry and add this ministry to this ministry, it's the same cost for the other bills when they recycle them or when they move new bills into circulation, and they probably will have to get a new what do you call it? The mold? It's not a mold. The thing they express the money with now to include the steel pan.
It'll be a change. It'll happen over a period of time.
It'll happen over a period of time.
Yeah, it'll happen overnight.
Letterheads change all the time in government ministries.
Trust me, they do.
Mm-hmm.
All it takes is the name change of a ministry to something else.
Or a minister.
Yeah.
In the same administration, or a minister in the same administration, and letterheads are the change.
Or when offices change.
Or when the prime minister moved this minister to that ministry, and the picture has to change, and this other change, and that other change. All that is normal thing.
Yeah.
It's not that serious, folks.
Did you watch the Democratic National Convention?
No.
No, it's too late.
Oh my God, it was
Ocasio-Cortez was quite energetic.
It was very
Obama-esque.
Obama-esque, very, very infectious.
Mm-hmm.
It was so joyous, and
the same sentiment.
President Biden gave a wonderful speech. I mean, the speech was long at the end, but he gave a really wonderful speech in looking at the issues, his legacy of America, where America is going, and it was a pretty lengthy speech that he gave at the end of the convention day one, but really, really, really well done. Hillary Clinton was also very motivational as a speaker. She's still excellent at that oratorial skill. She's really good.
Well, the troops have come out and circled the Kamala Harris tent and are offering huge support. I think she's due to speak on Thursday.
Yeah, probably speak on Thursday. She did speak last night, huh? She did come out.
She came on briefly last night.
Last night, which was a kind of surprise to people. But the crescendo of screaming and ovations throughout.
Meanwhile, on the other side, I'm better looking than her.
I was just going to tell you that.
Right. I'm better looking than her. Don't you think I'm better looking than her?
Hillary Clinton mentioned that. He said, well, the other side is on to talking about how people look and how people are. And she says something the equivalent.
I have never seen a candidate implode like Donald Trump with this new candidate. He doesn't know what to hold on to. First she wasn't bright, then she wasn't black, and then she wasn't Asian, and then oh my God, he all over the place.
Hillary Clinton referenced it, and she said something to the equivalent of been there, done that. But she didn't say exactly that way, but
And then Trump came on.
We know where he will go.
And talking about the honor medals and so on, that got a lot of backlash.
And then she had I think a Time magazine or some magazine cover, and he said, don't you think she looks like Melania, my beautiful wife Melania? And it's like, this man
delusional.
Oh my God, no. It's like he's like a child. Anyway, you all have a great day. Be safe out there. Please be safe and have a wonderful day, folks.
Yep. And happy birthday to my friend Lisa again. And of course, reminding you that theaters on this weekend. A lot of madnesses at the Central Bank Auditorium. Take an opportunity to de-stress and take it in theater. I always say support theater wherever it's happening in TNT. So we're on this weekend, Saturday at 8:30 and Sunday at 6:30 at the Central Bank Auditorium. The Central Bank box office is open from 12 noon to 6 p.m. daily. You can also buy tickets online and all the outlets I would have explained before. You can check RSRR Productions theater, you have to add a theater after RSRR Productions to get onto our social media page and contact. Have a fantastic day, whatever you do today. Remember to smile and laugh. It's good for your health.
All righty. Thank you, gentlemen. Talk with you guys right today. Come tomorrow morning. Okay? Right. Let's get into 8 o'clock news brief. EVSA.
This is your news bulletin from Power 102 Digital.
It is time for your 8 o'clock update. I'm Avril Sintel-Bob. Good morning. Virologist Professor Christopher Ora says that while persons should be concerned with the mpox virus, they should be careful not to panic. He told the Power Breakfast Show this morning that it's not like COVID-19 that can be spread by aerosol droplets that remain in the air, but through touch, which makes it more controllable. He said that the recent declaration by the WHO should be taken seriously by all countries. WHO Director General Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus determined that the upsurge of mpox in the Democratic Republic of the Congo and a growing number of countries in Africa constitutes a public health emergency of international concern. Professor Ora underscored the importance of vaccination against the virus, stating that persons all over the world are opting for the vaccines to mitigate the effects of the virus. Mpox is an infectious viral disease that can occur in humans and other animals. Symptoms include a rash that forms blisters and then crusts over, fever, and swollen lymph nodes. He said that there are a lot of social practices that kids may have that put them into direct contact with each other, making them susceptible to the virus. With reference to the dengue virus, Dr. Ora said that it has been causing problems all over the world, including Trinidad and Tobago. He said it's important to note that even in the dry season, the Aedes aegypti mosquito could be problematic, especially if persons have receptacles that house the mosquito larva. He said that sadly, it seems to be one of those vector-borne diseases that increase with climate change. He said that unfortunately it will continue to increase in years to come. Tobago, meanwhile, is presently experiencing a rise in dengue cases. The island's dengue cases have climbed to 36, with 18 new cases reported since August 2nd. In an update by the Division of Health, Wellness and Social Protection, Secretary Dr. Faith B. Israel said the island has not had any dengue fatalities. On July 7th, a release from the Tobago House of Assembly stated that the island had recorded its first laboratory-confirmed case of dengue fever following the wave of dengue cases that began in Trinidad on January 2024. The THA said then that the suspected case was flagged by relevant personnel at the Tobago Regional Health Authority, a sample taken, sent for testing, and confirmation received on July 5th. And Trinidad and Tobago schools will open doors to 23 Venezuelan children next month. However, hundreds of others will not be a part of the education system. Of the 23 children approved, 4 will be placed at government schools, 18 at denominational schools, and 1 at a private school. Education Minister Dr. Nian Gadsby-Dolly listed all the preparations, legal, administrative, and educational, to admit the young migrants. But Minister of National Security Fitzgerald Hines told reporters that about 2,000 Venezuelan minors are now in TNT, including those not registered as migrants. Well, that was your 8 o'clock update. Look out for news in full at 12 noon.
Up to date and credible. Power 102 Digital.
Minister, how you doing? Thank you for joining us, Minister Brian Manning.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Hope all is well.
Morning.
Is the sweater have you looking small, so?
Sorry?
Is the sweater have you looking small or Ozempic?
There's something called actually exercising.
The man playing basketball and thing all over again. The man real fit these days.
I'm trying my best, trust me.
Well, thank you so much for the invite on Sunday. Thank you so much for the invite. The entire Power Breakfast show will show up.
Good. Good. I'll look out for you.
What are you talking about now again?
His mom's birthday is on Sunday.
And why do you think you should be invited?
Why not?
I mean,
she's my good friend. We've worked closely for years.
Many years.
For many years.
Good morning. Let's just
all right, let's get into the meat of the matter.
My dog trying to get between us, Steve.
I don't know, boy. I don't know.
I'm trying to save your family. I'm trying to save your family gathering from somebody eating your food.
Unless you're making a load of doubles
and cake and ice cream and everything. So anyway,
have ice cream.
Thank you for joining us this morning. We wanted to discuss the impending property tax, which kicks in. Well, it's active now, but the deadline is September 30th. And just clarify what people can expect, those who have not received assessments. Etal, how is it going from the ministry's perspective, and who's collecting this? Is it being collected by the regional corporations as initially proposed?
At the revenue offices. So that's the place to go right now. I mean, this has been a tremendous initiative. You have to remember, this is the first time that we have been involved in a process like this one. And we've been trying to really update our property tax system since about 2008. So it has taken close to 15 years to really get to this point, to ensure that we have a more evolved and updated property tax system. I mean, if you remember what happened before, what obtained before, we had a flat land and building tax on the overall market value of your property of about 7.5%. Now we have a far lower 2% tax on the annual rental value of your property, which is one of the lowest tax rates in the Western Hemisphere. So these property taxes, of course, will be used to underpin local government activities, which is the filling of potholes, repairing roads, drainage, sewer systems, overall infrastructure is what we intend to use these funds for. So it has been very challenging. We have had some I would say, impediments to the entire process, but it's something that's coming along and will be implemented and is being implemented.
Minister, is it going directly to the local government, or is it going into a consolidated fund that everything mysteriously goes into and is apportioned by the Minister of Finance? So you may think, my road bad, but they're actually fixing a road in Moruga.
No.
And you're saying, well, what are pay my property tax for?
No, if you were looking at the legislation and the what is coming from the Minister of Finance, it goes into a fund for the local government bodies, and it actually, by law, cannot be used for anything else other than local government activities. I mean, that's one of the updates or the evolution of the property tax system for local government activities that was implemented by law. So it cannot be used for anything else other than local government activities.
Yeah, but the baseline, right, because, is it a group fund, or is it that ARIMA people know that this money, it's apportioned, ARIMA taxpayers paid $50 million?
Yes.
Or, you understand what I'm saying? Or is it just a big fund?
We know the number of properties in each area, and that's how it is apportioned to each area of funds. Wherever you pay your property taxes will be used in your community.
If persons have not yet gotten assessments, what should they do?
Wait until they get an assessment. If you have received a property tax notice, that is what you have to pay. You couldn't know exactly what your property tax rate would be if you have not received a property tax notice. So once you receive that, then you would know exactly what you should do.
Have all those notices gone out to property owners in the country, to your knowledge?
No, that's why we've had to push back that date a few times, because it has been challenging. We've had to update the entire system to ensure that people's information was correct, whether your address was correct, your full name, those things. And then it has to go to the Board of Inland Revenue, not board, but it goes to Inland Revenue, where it's then again processed, and then the assessment is sent out based on your name and your address.
And if you've neither received a notice or an assessment, what should you do?
You could reach out to the valuation division 1 to get an assessment in terms of the value of your property, and also reach out then to IRD, or Inland Revenue, for your tax notices. Your tax notice, you couldn't get a tax notice without having a valuation on your home. So the valuation division would be your first port of call in a situation like that.
So is it that the date of 30th December may also change? Here why I'm asking that. I actually have my two assessments in front of me now, right?
Yes.
One was dated 26 February that gave the date as 30th of September.
Yes.
The other notice I got, and that figure was higher than the second one that I got,
Yes,
right?
because it was reduced from 3% to 2%.
Right. But the second notice that's dated 20th June also has the deadline date as 30th of September.
That may also be adjusted at some point, but that's based on a call to be made by the Minister of Finance, and he will decide in due course exactly what will be done in that situation.
Right. So let me ask a couple other things on my situation. It also says, the last paragraph, objection to assessment. If you dispute this assessment, notify the Board of Inland Revenue in writing within 21 days from the date of receipt of the assessment.
Yes.
Is that also very subjective because, or it goes to the date of the letter that you got?
No, it goes to the date of the letter that you got. Once you receive, because we know when it was sent out. And when we send it out, you should receive it within two or three business days. So whenever you get it, the 21 days is the time period that you have from the receipt of the tax notice.
But I could safely tell you, Minister,
or from the issue of the tax notice, I should say.
Right, but I could safely tell you, I didn't get mine.
Wait, what does it actually say, Wendell?
It says
it can't say both. It can't say issue and receipt. It has to say one or the other. From a legal perspective.
When we issue the tax notice, it is going to be sent to your address within 2 or 3 business days. It is your obligation to receive your tax notice to the address that you have given us as the property or your mailing address. So we send it to the mailing address that people have given for themselves. So then you have to receive your notice and then make payment in due course.
Well, I could safely tell you I didn't get mine within that 2 to 3 days. So by the time I got mine, my 21 days was practically.
No, you wouldn't know if you got it within the 2 to 3 days.
No,
I have to know when we sent it out.
Right, well, it's dated 20th of June. So is that the date I'm using my 21 days from?
Yes.
Well,
not if it says receipt. If it says from days of receipt.
You would have gotten it within 2 to 3 days of issue. You would have the issue date on the notice. You couldn't have the date of receipt on it because, it's 2 to 3 days from the point that we sent it.
Yeah, right. But what if it says 21 days from receipt? It cannot be the issue date, not from a legal perspective.
The date is 2
and if they wanted a clear receipt date, they should have sent it by registered mail for which you had to sign.
Yes.
Right.
Then that's my then the 21 days is properly curated, so to speak.
Well,
yes.
if you...
Otherwise, I think, Wendell, I think what will happen is that there would be some latitude in terms of the objection date, because you'll be saying, well, I only received it, and they will probably exercise some discretion that you can still...
It has to be. The law is not going to be that strict in terms of, down to the last second or minute of receipt in terms of determining whether you should or shouldn't pay property taxes. The law has already said that you have to pay property taxes.
Right.
And any kind of dispute over minutes and seconds is not going to prevent you from having the obligation of paying your property taxes.
Right. So that's why I want that cleared up, because date of receipt can't be date of issue.
It is close enough. It is approximate. So it's not like it's a week or 2 weeks or a month. It's within 2 to 3 days of the notice being actually printed and issued that you would receive your property tax notice. And it would be sent to the address that you have given as your mailing address.
Fine.
You know what is amazing?
You know how our mail works sometimes, Minister. You know how it works.
No, sir. TT Post, we have been working closely with TT Post in this effort, and it has been given priority. And you have received your notice within 2 to 3 business days of issue.
But I'm not arguing with this because I know I didn't. So I'm not arguing. But anyway, another question is the issue of the payment. It says this payment is assessed for the period ending 31st of December 2024 in accordance to the Property Tax Act, right? And you have to pay it by 30th of December. I'm assuming that payment that they put there is for the entire year of 2024?
Is for the year, correct.
From January to December 2024.
Yes, and that's why there's been a far less outcry now that the tax notices have been issued as opposed to when the valuation notices were issued. When we sent out the valuation notices, some people mistakenly believed that that was the amount that they had to pay for the year, which was incorrect. That was simply your annual rental value based on the overall value of your property. Of course, the property tax is 2% annually for your annual rental value. And that is what you would have been issued by the Board of Inland Revenue. And that is the actual amount that you have to pay for the entire year.
Right. So I'm assuming then that as of 1st of January 2025, that figure will now kick in also again for that year of 2025.
For the new year, correct.
But when will that be?
Unless there are any changes announced by the Ministry of Finance.
Right. And is that deadline also going to September of 2025, or it may be a shorter period?
It may be, but it's subject to change. As I said, the Minister of Finance may decide to make a change there because of the timing of when the assessments were sent out, the tax assessments.
Minister, are you willing to take some calls because the audience has quite a few questions?
I just want to ask one other question.
That we have done this.
I just want to ask one other question that's been raised. We have a Ministry of Digitization.
Yes.
And yet, this big rollout of property tax, as far as I'm aware, you can't pay it online.
Yes, that is,
and that's incredulous to me.
Yes,
that the government has a Ministry of Digitization where you're moving in a particular direction, a huge task for thousands of homeowners across the country having to pay substantially more, and you're saying no, you have to go into revenue offices.
Yes, and that's something that you're absolutely correct.
It's ridiculous.
You're absolutely correct on that, and there should be an announcement within the next few weeks in terms of how to be able to pay online. Until then, you have to use the revenue offices which are available in every community. But we do accept that the electronic version of payment has to be implemented, and it will be available within the next few weeks.
Minister, you spoke earlier on.
Into September, you know, Minister.
Agreed.
And it's the 30th of September that you have to pay it by.
It is for now. And
I think he's hinting that date will change, Richard.
I'm saying it may change. I didn't definitively say it will change. I'm saying that's up to the Minister of Finance, and he would make an announcement at the appropriate time.
Yeah, I accept the hint.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier on that when Richard asked a question that, for example, if Arima Bar Corporation collects $60 million, it's apportioned to the Arima Bar Corporation for use by law to do corporation things.
Yeah.
This may not fall into your garden, but what happens if particular corporations who've already indicated, some of them, that they are not in favor of this, don't use the money for borough focused repairs of roads and etc.? What is that? Does that now fall within the remit of the Minister of Local Government, or will they be breaking the law? How are burgesses to identify that, well, I paid my property tax, a year has passed, my roads are still terrible, my drains are in disrepair, etc., etc.?
Yeah, I don't think there's been any state body that has said that they've been receiving enough funding for activities. Also, the law states that it has to be used for materials and certain activities. For instance, you couldn't use the property tax revenues to add more employees to the corporation. There's a thin, narrow segment where that spending can be done legally. If not, you're in violation of the law. And then if anything is reported, you would be assessed by the law as to whether you have committed.
But I'm talking about the burgesses now who would have paid their property taxes and complied with the law, and they are not seeing the changes that they want to see in their communities because they have paid property tax.
Yes.
Hopefully to get these services provided.
They would have grounds for complaint, of course, and the corporations have an obligation to do the job that they have received funding to do. Of course, some of our corporations may have efficiency issues, but this is to make sure that the funding is at least made available so that those activities can be conducted. If there's a challenge there in terms of funding as against the actual work being done, that is something that can be determined by the law if someone decides to go that route.
But we already have those challenges in some of these corporations.
Some of them do have efficiency issues, but we are ensuring that going forward that the problem is not going to be a lack of funding, because I think most of the corporations have accepted that they do not receive significant or sufficient funding for all of the activities that they want to do over the course of a period. And we have accepted that the local government framework is one that isn't working, and that was what the government had. Its campaign was based on local government elections of last year, that this system here is failing, it is not working, so we are trying to upgrade and evolve the entire local government system. And part of that evolution involves how local government activities are funded, and we have decided that property taxes is the best way to fund local government activities, because property owners are the ones that benefit the most from local government activities.
But I think Paul's question pointed to a penalty in the event that they don't use it for the purposes it was meant to. What happens?
Yes, that is available. It's also in the legislation. There's criminal penalties, there's financial penalties, there's public review.
Minister Manning, you well know that it is on record in the Parliament that there's several corporations that haven't even filed audited financial returns for decades, in some instances as much as 15 years. So while people are paying these taxes, they expect a particular return on it, because it's another financial hardship on them. And to wait for a corporation and this is not really directed at you, this is people's going to be responding in this way and saying that, well, they ain't providing financial audited statements. We can't hold them accountable because they ain't doing that, because we ain't gonna know what to do with the money as they provide the financial audited statements. So it's a convoluted process to get redress.
I was about to remind you that I'm in the Ministry of Finance. Some of these questions would have to be directed to the Ministry of Local Government. Our job is to ensure
That's your colleague.
that the funding is available.
Right next door in San Fernando too.
That they want to carry out. Okay, you would have to ask my colleague about internal issues and workings within the local government bodies.
Someone called earlier and was very adamant that he is determined not to pay property tax until commercial, industrial start collecting taxes on those. And the Minister of Finance was asked this in one of the debates leading to this, and he did give an indication that there's a timeline. Can you identify that timeline when those entities are going to start receiving instructions to pay taxes?
I can't give an exact timeline, but that is something that definitely will be implemented. As soon as we get this part of it done. You have to remember, we have about, I think it's just over 600,000 properties in Trinidad and Tobago. About 400,000 of them are residential properties. We want to use property taxes to underpin local government activities. So if you want to have sufficient funding to carry out these activities, you would have to address residential properties first. It's a massive exercise that has taken over 15 years for us to complete. So we have been working diligently with especially hardworking people at the Valuation Division, also at the Board of Inland Revenue. First of all, the integrity of the data is something that we had to assess and to ensure was correct so that people would receive a sensible and reasonable notice.
But has the state, meaning the government, and the collection of property tax and the process for collection of property tax is one part of it. And as you said, it has been quite a journey to get here, to get the resumption of property tax as the classification of property tax in that land and whatever it was. But that's just one part of the equation. Collecting the tax is one thing. Having the corporations and the city corporations and the borough corporations working efficiently is just as important as collecting the taxes, because you could collect all the taxes you want, send the money to the corporations, and they still not are able, because of their inefficiencies, to do that under the same government. How do you respond to that? Given that and you've identified the inefficiencies in some corporations, and I don't think the state has placed enough emphasis on that equal to collection, because if you can collect all you want, put the money there, and if the corporation is not efficient, it's the same outcome for the public.
Let me finish answering the first question first, right? We have just over 600,000 properties in Trinidad and Tobago, but just over 400,000 of them are residential. We have about 100,000+ in terms of commercial, and then the rest would be agricultural lands. So clearly, if you wanted to implement a system where you had enough funding for local government activities, you had to go residential first. Also, residential property owners are the ones that will benefit the most from local government activities. Now, what you just mentioned there is absolutely correct in terms of the efficiency of our local government bodies. And there's a policy for local government reform. And that reform is going to lead to a far more efficient local government process where a lot of these activities are going to be addressed. You have to remember, with local government reform, we are really reducing the level of bureaucracy. No longer will a request to fill a pothole have to go to the ministry, have to go to cabinet, and then have to go to parliament. Because that's the system we have now. They're just levels of bureaucracy that make things untenable. We have given autonomy to the various local government bodies.
Minister Manning, I'm loath to interrupt you, but with the greatest respect, the road to hell is paved with great intentions, and policies of reform does not necessarily mean that local government bodies, some of which have stated emphatically that they're not on this at all, is going to mean changes that your wonderful mother championed this decades ago.
Yes, local
and it didn't change.
I'm going to bite my tongue here.
Implemented yet. You couldn't implement local government reform without the necessary funding. So it's a lockstep program. You had to get the funding available first and then reform local government. So if one leads to the other, I couldn't reform local government and say, well, you have autonomy and you can do certain things and you don't need to receive funding from the consolidated fund. You have your own pool of resources when there was no pool of resources. You had to have the resources there first, then reform local government, and then make sure that things are done within the legal parameters that have been set and determined by the legislature or the parliament.
Tell me something, Minister. Two questions. One, somebody just asked me, sent a question for me to ask you. Vacant land, that do vacant people with vacant land, no house on it, do they have to pay property tax? Because they have not received their assessment as yet for their vacant land. They have received it for their, apparently they have a residence elsewhere, but they said for their vacant land, they have not received property. And another person just sent a question asking, does the same system hold for Tobago, or is something different happening under the THA?
Yeah, no, last time I checked, we had the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. It's the same system in both islands. And if you're a property owner, it depends on whether it's residential, it's commercial, or agricultural. But you will eventually receive a property tax notice for any land that you own. So that's the bottom line.
Guys, I thought
but they're saying that they haven't received that. Is there a preference being given to residential land where people actually have residences? Is that where the preference is?
No, I don't think that's where the preference is. They just may not have received it as yet.
The lines are open.
Yeah, let's take a couple calls with Minister Manning. You don't wonder. I have a stated view on local government reform, because of how long I spent in there.
Which is what?
Which is that it's a hoax. I've said it. Local government reform. I've said it. It's a hoax.
Government has publicly stated that the local government system in its current format is not working. And that is
I know that for sure.
Champion local government reform and also reform of the financing of local government activities. And that is why these two programs, property taxes and local government reform, work together in lockstep to ensure that we have a better system that actually delivers the services that the people of Trinidad and Tobago want.
Let's get into this call. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Manning. First of all, let me apologize if my tone gets a little rowdy.
But just make it short. I have a lot of calls coming through.
Okay, Mr. Manning, I listen to what you're saying there. What you're saying there doesn't make a lot of sense to me. You are saying that you have to get the money before you do the reform. That seems to me you're putting the cart in front of the horse. In my mind, you set policies, so when the money comes, policies is already established to secure the money. Second of all, I am having the problem right now trying to get certain things from local government. And they never have machinery, they never have equipment, the truck breakdown, all kind of excuses why they cannot do certain things. And I know you're going to tell me, well, they need the money to fix the equipment. That does not happen on the ground, Mr. Manning.
All right, let me.
Not one for people to
I
get.
don't think.
All
I
right,
don't
we
think
have cause
we
waiting.
read
Thank
the
you.
local
Thank you.
government legislation, because that's exactly what it's trying to address. Local government reform gives many of the regional bodies autonomy, so that they don't have to make requests to the Ministry of Local Government and then to the Ministry of Finance and then to Cabinet to get simple things done. We accept that the current local government system is not working. That's exactly what the local government campaign was last year for the government. We said it's not working, we are offering reform. But part of that reform says that each local government body will have a pool of resources so that they can make quick decisions. It leads to better efficiency, where they can decide if there's a pothole that needs to be repaired. I don't have to call the Minister of Local Government to get funding. We have a pool of resources there.
But money alone doesn't mean efficiency. That's my contention.
Hold on, and that things can be done far quicker than the previous system. We accept that the funding hasn't been available. We accept that the current system is in some cases unworkable, and that is why the reform has to be there and why the funding has to be available for the reform. There's no reform without funding.
Good morning, caller.
Clear and obvious.
Yeah. Hi. Morning.
Morning.
My question is okay, when the resources come, the transference, I've been listening, and they say the local government estate officers supposed to be transferred into a community policing situation. And I don't know what is the follow-up on that. And when the resources come, would we see better urban planning within the environment, illegal vending, illegal buildings, better aesthetics. But these illegal things, because the community policing is connected to that kind of, and taking things, is the training happening? What is happening around this situation of community policing in holding a better urban planning infrastructure where everything is whatever.
Yes.
At this moment.
Okay. I think that's an excellent question. And one of the challenges we've had is not having enough community police. We have not had enough. And a lot of that sometimes comes down to available funding, just like URP workers and so on, or corporation employment. That's been difficult to do some of those things because of the inconsistency in funding, because the system is absolutely bureaucratic to get some of those things done. And, so reform is supposed to shorten or reduce the levels of bureaucracy involved in getting simple tasks done. And we expect it to make more funding available for some of the other fundamental aspects in terms of planning, more community police, and the other resources that corporate would need to function efficiently and properly.
Yeah. Well, it also envisages some new office holders too in the different corporations. I know that.
Yes, like the councillors now would be from a full-time position and not a part-time position as obtains today. So you would have a councillor that is working 24/7 for you instead of part-time, because that's what the job allows for now. So there are many changes that are involved in local government reform that should lead to greater efficiency across the board.
We were told by the Prime Minister, we had him on late last year, that many of those other parts of the Act would have been operationalized and proclaimed at the start of 2024. Clearly, there's been pushback and delays. Is there any new timeline on when those aspects, because that is also part of the efficiency, those internal changes in the corporations?
Yes, well, as I said, the legislation itself is based on the funding from property taxes. So the property taxes, there had to be a stream of revenues first before we can implement some of those reforms legislatively. So now that we're getting this done, and this is, like I said, this has never been done before. The land and building taxes system was in place for almost 100 years, and it was about 7.5% of the overall property value. That has now been reduced to the level that we have now. So as soon as we get this area done, where there's a flow of revenues to the corporations, then we can implement, for instance, first implement full-time councillors, which is going to require full-time salaries. And if the funding isn't available for some of those things, it just couldn't get done. The funding had to be there first.
Minister Manning, you know what has been my angst for the last 25 years, and it spans all the governments, so it's because I've experienced all the governments, is the fact that local government has never been proposed as part of this constitution. So I don't even know why we're going through all this, because in the morning,
part of the constitution, you said?
It's not part of the constitution. Local government elections, it's not.
Yeah.
It doesn't. Local government is not protected by the Constitution. So even proposing to make representative full time, I don't know how that will work. But I'm done. I've passed on my battle. I'm gonna just enjoy myself on radio here in the morning.
Yeah, I mean that's something that can be recommended to the local government reform persons, because there is still, some debate and consultations. And it's a living document. Because
tell me something. And you can correct me.
Hold on. Because the reform policy is the way that it is right now, doesn't mean that that's the way it's going to be forever. Of course, as we go along and we see challenges and changes that are required, changes will be made. So it's not etched in stone, regardless of what we do. That's one of the benefits of it not being within the Constitution, because then you would require opposition support to have some of these changes done. And because it's not something that
they didn't do it either when they were in government. So clearly they're not interested in it either.
They can't block it at this point. That's the benefit of it.
But correct me if I'm wrong, isn't your WASA bill linked to your annual rental value of your property?
Yes. Your WASA bill is linked.
Isn't it connected somehow to that?
Well, we use various databases that we were allowed to ensure that the data was correct, but I'm not exactly certain with how the WASA, your WASA assessment would be involved in your valuation. That would be something for someone.
No. That your valuation will eventually affect your WASA bill. That's where I'm going.
I'm uncertain of that. I'm not aware of that.
Yeah.
All right. Minister, we want to thank you this morning for being with us.
We're gonna have to have you back, Minister Manning, because a lot of people are complaining we didn't take enough calls. So we're gonna have to have you.
If you would get Dr. Behave, then we could take more calls, but you always
that's not happening. That's not happening. So forget that.
All the best to you, Minister. Of course, I'll see you Sunday.
I'm great. I can't complain at all.
Long time.
Yes, it is. It has been.
Very long time. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us on the Power Breakfast Show. Of course, Richard, Wendell, and of course, Paul is on the program as well.
Good morning, Dr. Butcher. Long time no see. Good to see you.
Morning. Good morning, guys. Good morning.
How is your lovely wife?
Oh, she's great. I'm taking care of her. Everything is in order.
Then she's in good hands. Dr. Butcher, for those of you who may not know.
She's reciprocating very nicely.
Good morning. The other Dr. Butcher.
He's like a typical red man, eh?
Dr. Butcher is a former Minister of Sport, if I'm not mistaken. That's correct?
Well, I did a number of things. I was in sport, I was in health, I was, all over the place. And Prime Minister's office at one time. Yeah.
And he's also, because I know that I took a class with him.
I started off as Parliamentary Secretary responsible for sport with Jennifer Johnson as the senior minister. And then, I went into cabinet after that. And I went to the Prime Minister's office. Yeah.
So you have a vast experience, and also you lecture in governance and in business management. So you have a vast experience in management and governance.
I lecture, and my pet subjects are strategic planning, leadership, and governance, corporate governance.
But more importantly, gentlemen, he was the member of parliament for Barataria Sanwo And I can't help but notice that nominations open recently for that. Is your name anywhere there, Dr. Butcher?
No. I am like Brian Lara. I know when to, advise from behind.
All right.
Some guys they tend to hold on too long and they get abused in the ring. Yeah.
Like
you
who?
know it. You know it.
Dr. Bashir, don't answer that. We wanted you on because, I mean, based on your experience in sport, and your family is well known in sport also from Barataya, and your expertise in strategic management, a lot of discussion has come out about TNT's performance at the Olympic and TNT's sports program generally. Let's start with what you thought of our athletes representing us in Paris and the outcomes of that.
Well, it's a long story. If we over the years, for example, way back in 1986, we had established the National Sporting Authority to be developed, and we also looked at all the research was done so that coming into government, we would hit the ground running, and we looked at developing a national sport authority and the funding for it. The funding, we established the National Lotteries Control Board in 1987. Within 6 months of coming into government, 6 to 9 months, the national lotteries was established because we realized that to operate properly, you need funding, and all the funding from national lotteries was to go to sport for the development of sport. But by the time it went in cabinet and came back out, they watered it down, and you had a sports and culture fund. You had some of it going under the purview of the prime minister then, and sport ended up back with all the money going into the consolidated fund over the years, and money now being allocated out of the consolidated fund back into sport, and we don't get the type of funding that is necessary to prepare our athletes over the period of time, doing my research on sport and management, there are 7 components or pillars. If we maximize them, we will be able to produce athletes for the elite stage on a consistent basis. When we came in and we did the work very early in government, we realized that we were not producing athletes on a consistent basis. We did not have the structure for it, and we did not have the programs. So we developed and we looked at these seven pillars. And the pillars very quickly, we identify the athletes. It comes like getting good seed to plant. You must have good coaches. You must have good administrators. You have to have the facilities. You have to have the funding. You have to have the research and development tied into the universities doing that work. And you have to have the welfare of the players. If you maximize those 7 pillars, those 7 components, you will produce athletes on a consistent basis for the form. Under that structure, what you will do is that you will select whether it's 5 or 10 disciplines that you want to go to the Olympics or the World Games, World Cup, or cricket, sailing, whatever. But you have to select now 5 to 10 sports initially. Work with those, make them get financially independent as you go along, and then wean them off and take others as you go along. It has to be done incrementally. So we set up that under Roger Boynes at the time, and we set up the sport company. Now, the sport company was the forerunner to the Sports Commission, which we brought it in as the National Sporting Authority. But with further discussions as we went along, we realized that the Sports Commission was ideal because part of the problem, which exists even today after 1987, that is over 35 years, we have not established the Sports Commission. And the Sports Commission, in discussions with senior people in sport and who know sport, would prevent the politicians from being involved in the selection and the fancy dances that we have with sport. What happens is every time a government changes, you have good programs being abolished new programs coming, and it's a toing and froing, and therefore the structure and the development, ends up on the wrong end of the pendulum. So we have to do a number of things. We have coming out of the Olympics, like coming out after every game, whether it's cricket, whether it's football, whether it's track and field. After every major games, we will hear a lot of constructive criticism, but nothing is done. And it must start with the government. You see, over the years, again, if you check, we have three streams of funding for sport. We had you have a developed countries which private enterprise is strictly the people who fund sport. You have the communist stroke socialist countries where the government is entirely in charge of sport. And then you have the developing countries like Trinidad and Tobago, where it is a mixture. But in the smaller countries, you find that, like Trinidad and Tobago, the major funding will come from the government, because we don't have a culture like Jamaica, where in Jamaica you have quite a lot of corporate sponsors as well. We have to develop that culture in Trinidad and Tobago. Our corporate sponsors, for example, they don't really contribute much to sport. You see a lot of contractors getting contracts for 400 million, 300 million, and some of them, they don't even get involved in sport or culture. And under corporate responsibility, they have a vote for that, and they will get credit for that. Part of the problem, again, government had introduced very well an incentive for corporate sponsors, whereby you could invest in sport up to $500,000 and you will get a credit for it. But what happened? What the businessmen realized is that getting that credit took years and it wasn't worth it. So while it was a good initiative, because of the implementation, we had trouble there again, and we didn't encourage corporate sponsors to put the kind of money we want into sport.
Dr. Butcher, what about the sporting governing bodies? Because you said rightly so, the government has a huge role to play in investment, but there's been a lot of discussion about the sporting governing bodies and their capacity, and there's sometimes lack of governance structures, lack of the ability for strategic planning, and management also, and they in our structure play a significant role when the funding comes down from the state or the policy, in terms of actually administering the different disciplines and finding the talent and developing the talent in communities, etc.
Well, the national sporting associations, at present, we're in shambles, total shambles. The last very good administrator we had in sports was Aloy Likwai. And that was the only discipline of sport at the time that had their own facilities. You remember the cricket center in Vancouver there. He was the last guy. He produced. I remember talking to Aloy at the length, because we had formed the sport company, and Lincoln Phillips wanted to come down here, and I advised him our role that he could play. And I took him to Aloy Likwai at the time for him to get a better understanding and appreciation of what he had to do. And I said, but Aloy, cricket do ever be in Bacchanal or whatever it is for travel and things like that. And he says, Ken, when the West Indies play here in Trinidad and Tobago, the fund that we get for there, we invest it in the youth of the country. And in a few years' time, Trinidad and Tobago will dominate Caribbean cricket and go onto the world stage. And coming out of that program, we had the present crop of guys you see there, like Pollard and all of them. So that Aloy Likwai was an extremely good administrator. The administrators we have now, they surface coming through the ranks. And from my observation, because I'm very involved in certain disciplines of sports still, and the leadership of the national associations are not qualified for that type of job, and therefore the government, the ministry, I felt should, and in going forward, this would be my recommendation. For example, there are certain sports that are directly overseen by the sport company, I think about 10 or 12 sports, and then the balance of them. I think we have about 50 plus national associations. So about 10, 12 of them are controlled by the sport company, and the balance directly go to funding from the Ministry of Sport and Community Development. But what should happen? You see, we have this thing must be live. It can't be static. You can't establish something today and it holds for the next 5, 10 years. It is something that is very fluid. And what should happen is that, for example, the sport company, they should call, and they do call for this, but something is missing. You have to send in your strategic plan and your development plan and whatever else you have to the sport company or to the ministry. You have to send in that so that they have an idea. And you would say, okay, this is the types of funding I need. And then the sport company will tell you that we could only
But what
have
about
so much. You have to get.
if the sporting organizations don't have the capacity to create a mission statement, a vision statement, a strategic plan, a financial plan? Because a lot of the times, as you say, they come up through the ranks of players themselves, and they just don't have that capacity. It's not an innate skill very often. You have to go and learn it, or you have to bring people in to build that capacity. Yeah.
So this is what I'm saying here now. So when they send in that, or if they send in and tell you, well, we can't meet because the sport company now should have an officer or two. If you're dealing with 10 sports, I would have two persons in the sport company and maybe two by the Ministry of Sport who will be hired. Take Atto Bolden, for example. Atto Bolden is extremely knowledgeable on sport, but he can't get in to any association based on the structure. And so he would have to most probably try and get in as a president, a vice president, whatever. He has to lobby this, that, that. But nobody's going to get him in there. So what should happen now, and this is why I'm talking about being fluid. You need to hire people like Atto Bolden into the sport company, hire them, and you say, you're right, you will deal with these 5 sports for me, and then so when they say, let us say, for example, track and field said, boy, we can't afford, we don't know how to do a strategic planning. When they meet with him, he will be able to say, okay, we will hire somebody and we will work with you. We'll develop your strategic plan for you. What you want, so and so and so. If for those who send it in, he will be able to tweak it and say, hey, this program doesn't make sense. You want to go to 5 different tournaments or so. We don't have the funding for that. So he comes, because of his knowledge, he will be the one now to work with the national sporting organizations and get their strategic plan and their development, part of the development plan being part of that, the funding, everything like that, the hiring of coaches, everything. And now we end with a thing. We will say, okay, we, Trinidad and Tobago, we are only going to concentrate on 10 disciplines. We're not all over the shop. This is the funding for it. You know how much it costs a British athlete to just qualify for the World Cup? Over 2.5 million pounds was spent on one athlete in order to get a medal. But they had a plan, and they say they wanted 50 to 70 medals, and they achieved the status, and they did what they had to do. We have to get and tweak the sport company, tweak the Ministry of Sport, and let us drive it from there. We need quality people in the national associations. The national associations, I am sorry to say, they don't have the capability right now. I don't know anyone offhand. They might have outside there that I am not involved with, but from what I know, the majority of them, they don't have the capacity, and therefore we are wasting funding, and we are killing our athletes, and we are disappointing the nation.
Well, we are a small country. I'm just wondering if some of this capacity has to be imported, and that you may not be able to source it locally, depending on what kind of specialty sport you're looking at in the identified range. And do you have any objection to that?
No, you're spot on. For example, when we started the Academy of Sports and Leisure Studies at the University of Trinidad and Tobago, you have to understand that the structure, you must have a pathway. So we start in primary schools, secondary schools, tertiary education. in the secondary schools around 13 to 17, 18, you will join a club and it runs simultaneously. You have a structure coming out of the best players, they go into the national age groups and you move up. Now, remember, I told you that there are 7 pillars, 7 components. One of those components will be the coaches. And at UTT, for example, we hired a volleyball coach that moved volleyball from 90 something when he came to within the first 30, the first 30, and we came onto the world stage. So where we lack coaching, we can hire that. Where you have where the research department, for example, we went to Loughborough University, and it was a joke. Um, Both of us, Brian and myself, went to Loughborough University because Professor Julian, bless his soul, top guy, loved to work with him. Decision maker. I remember when I went to work with Professor Julian, he wanted to send me to Australia to work with and do some work with a university across there. And I said, Professor Julian, the first place we have to go is to Loughborough University. They are number 1 in Europe in sport, and we have to go to them. The next day, Professor Julian summoned me to his office. He had the head of the University of Loughborough on the line. We chatted, and in 2 weeks' time, I was in Loughborough University discussing with them. On the second trip, we went with Brian Lara. When we went into their place, we saw a set of monitors, computer monitors, about 15 of them, with only West Indian jerseys on it. So when the guy came out to us, we said, I think we're in the wrong place, He said, no, come in, I'm expecting you. I said, but on the monitor, they are seeing a lot of West Indians. He said, yeah, we all are playing right now at home, at your home, but you coming up here to play us in 2 weeks' time, and we're researching you. For example, we have Brian Lara here. The research shows that within 20 minutes, we will get at least 2 chances because of the shots that he play if we bowl consistently, so on, so on, so on, so. When we discussed with Loughborough what we were doing, the greatest compliment I have had in my life came from that gentleman. He said, Mr. Butcher, if we have to do over our program, we will have to follow you. That means the Academy of Sports and Leisure Studies. That was
Dr.
way back
Butcher,
in 2007.
right. So, Dr. Butcher, I remember all of what you're speaking about, and I remember Ken Julian's involvement and under the leadership of then DC's Prime Minister, Patrick Manning. So what and when did it change? Because I remember Gordon Greenwich and all of them, all of those people were here conducting training sessions and so on. I remember that. When did that change and why?
It changed when we had a change in government. When the UNC came into government, they crashed the programs. For example, we had 130 persons on scholarship, and part of the scholarship program was that the scholarship program where we gave universities scholarships. Each discipline had to make sure that at least 60% of the athletes on the national team came through our program. And it started to happen with table tennis, with netball, and so. When the UNC came into power, they brought in Darren Ganga, a poor guy, means well, but he didn't understand properly the program, and they changed up the program, and it went to naught. We lost all the scholarship programs, what we had ideal going and things like that. So, and that is why we said you need a sports commission where the president of the country, on advice of the then prime minister, whoever that may be, to select the commissioners. So regardless of change of government, you do not have change of programs and people just tweaking and messing about for political reasons. So that is one of the solutions. And the reason why the Sports Commission was not established at the time, in 2007, when we started to do the Sports Commission, Patrick Manning was another genuine soul and very futuristic and forward-thinking. We formed the sports company in Patrick Manning home over a weekend, within 48 hours, Within 48 hours, we were having problems with the Sports Commission. And when we chatted with him, he said, Ken, what's the problem? I say, well, they tell me that it will take about 5 to 7 years for all illegal stuff to come through Parliament and this and that and the other. I say, Roger Boynes was the then minister. I said, okay, well, let's form a special purpose state company, which in the meantime, we are waiting and doing things to develop the Sports Commission. We will be able to do some of the things of the Sports Commission. And it had a little to and froing. I had with me the memorandum of articles of another company. When Roger was saying it would take a long time, when I produced it, I say, Prime Minister, we have the memorandum of articles of the export centers. Look at right here, so-and-so. He said, Roger, how long this will take? Roger said about 3 months. We had the sport company up and running. You need people who are knowledgeable. You need people who are decision makers and implementers. We have a lot of
Legislation sets the tone for how we treat each other as a society. It provides those boundaries and the expectations, and it also upholds the rights of all of the citizens.
Legislation is important for everyone in society as it sets rules and regulations that create an organized, safe and fair environment in which everyone is equal.
They form the opinion that because you have a disability, that you are somehow unintelligent, stupid, ridiculously asinine, you name it. So legislation is quite important, and I hope that legislation is soon coming so that people with disabilities can be who they are. People first, disabilities after.